I always, a little piece of my brain wants to say,
Hello, my fellow Westorians. Welcome to Valar Rereadis for Dunk and Egg, the Mystery Night, Part 3, the third. Let's see what today brings us, my fellow Westorians. Last week...
Aziz, one of these times we should do the intro music a cappella. We should just be like...
da, 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 da. Yeah, like lounge singers, yeah. That's a good idea. That's a very good idea, Sean. You're full of good ideas. But
we're open to submissions, by the way.
Yeah. But are you full of good beverages? No, you're full of weird beverages. What are you drinking today?
Weird and good are often the same.
That's true. Weird is often good. I mean, I'm definitely on team weird being good most of the time.
This is the Red Machine Naked Drink mixed with black cherry sparkling ice.
Oh.
And red Mountain Dew, Code Red.
Well, you got to go red with red. You're on theme anyway. That's good. You got to have, you got to match your clothing and your beverages, right? That's how you look sharp in this modern era. So we've got some fun stuff today. As usual, I want to offer a hearty thanks to Nina for her writing assistance. We've got some cool takes, some things I would have missed, some historical anecdotes. As usual, it wouldn't be History of Westeros podcast without the extra dose of historical anecdotes and connections. Latest article on Nina's blog, goodqueenalley.tumblr.com. That's one L, of course, is on Kyle the Cat and Glendon Ball, right on topic here. Both of them arrive at the tournament with a goal for their career in mind, and both knights face the choice of how much they're willing to sacrifice personally to get those places that they desire. So that's cool. Good topic to consider amongst many here that the Mystery Night provides us with. You can join the discussions offline for this series and for all of our other discussions on A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, and a variety of other topics, including things outside of the fandom. That includes Discord, Slack, Facebook, Twitter, email, and, well, you can talk to us on Facebook or really everywhere. We're almost on every site there is. I'm not on TikTok.
You can't send us a letter.
You can't. Yeah, you can't send us a letter. I guess you could send us a letter, but we don't exactly publish our address. If you send us a letter, we'll be impressed. It is possible. We do have an address. We aren't living in a void, an addressless void. Yet. That is our goal, though. We want to move to an addressless void. The problem,
just don't move to a dressless void.
Yeah, right. The problem is bandwidth. You really can't get good internet in the void. And you can't live without good internet. Thanks to our patrons for keeping the lights on, keeping us functional over here. We would not be able to do this without y'all. This is our, well, bread and butter, we'll say. There's lots of good euphemisms for this, but this is great. We're so thankful to be here and doing this. Let's get to it. If you want to support us on patreon.com, well, that's where we're at. But let's get to the material.
I'm going to say, Aziz, I appreciate the recruitment theme you picked up on here.
Recruitment theme, yeah, right. This is a good one. Yeah, it's kind of a sub-theme that's pretty prominent in the story, but it's particularly prominent today. I think this is sort of like I guess it's the pre-climax, you can call it. the stuff that happens right before the ending. We'll probably finish with the reveal when Dunk gets confirmation that John the Fiddler is Daemon. And we are on target to finish this in 4 episodes, just like we did with the other 2. We'll should be able to do that without any wrangling.
You know, I think Dunk got confirmation about 18 times, actually.
I guess what I mean is from the man himself. Yeah, Damon admit cops to it himself. But you're right. Yeah, there's so many. That's a good thing.
Like he says Damon at one point.
Yeah.
Still hasn't pieced it together.
That's so good. Yeah. Yeah, it's Nina's even wrote a point about how this is an ongoing theme of people just trying, especially Maynard, just trying to get him to see it and just progressively getting more and more blunt about it. And that it's just too late. So
to be fair, I'm not sure at what point I pieced it together. I don't think I fully had it till the 17th of 18 clues.
You might have figured it out sooner if you lived in this world, but yeah. That's true. It's true. Maybe not. So let's talk about Squires. That's the first spot here. Dunk gets back to their tent, which, by the way, is a little bit of an upgrade. I wonder if there's any hidden symbolism here. I'm guessing not, because George didn't really write about it. He didn't add any sort of poetic meaning to it. But the idea that Dunk is no longer looking up at the stars every night. I mean, he still could look at the stars, but there's a tent in the way now. So that could have been something he chose to write about. Maybe he will later, because surely Dunk and Egg will have a little bit more cash on hand, going forward. They're not going to always be on the edge of poverty, I think. Maybe not. Maybe they'll just always be broke and they'll never have a decent tent.
At some point, the tent could become a burden, too. I think right now they have 3 horses, but if they didn't, they might not be able to carry that tent along.
That's a good point. That's a good point. You got to keep a small tent. Mm-hmm. Our friend...
A small tent for Dunk?
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe that wouldn't
This
work.
way, I guess he can be covered, but still look at the stars because his head will stick out.
We have a friend named Joe who's going on a big walk, the big, long Appalachian Trail walk. And there's a lot of preparation you have to do for that. And it's like every little ounce you're carrying is crucial. So you map it out like in a spreadsheet. And he said he's got like a tent that weighs like 9 or 10 ounces or something wild like that. Like, geez. So that's what Dunk needs. But that would probably cost about half the price of a dragon egg in this.
Yeah, that's probably modern technology that he couldn't get if he wanted to.
No way. Yeah, you're right. Totally. Just some sort of strange modern tent fabric whose name I don't know. Some long word that ends in "een," like neprozeprakine. Or that's it. That's it.
Dragonine,
Valyrian, Valyrian steel tent. Yeah, that's it. So he sees that Egg is already back at the tent, and he's about to talk about what he just overheard. He's about to be like, hey, I overheard these dudes talking about like some stuff that sounded conspiratorial, because he overheard I'm referring to the eavesdropping scene, of course. But he's also drunk, though, and sees Egg's busted lip, and that just distracts him from the stuff he overheard, and then this becomes the topic of conversation instead. And then by the next day, Dunk is sort of forgotten, not completely forgotten, but he's so confused about what he overheard that because he was drunk and he's hungover, it hardly even comes up. It doesn't even end up mattering because it comes up elsewhere. Like you said, there's a bajillion different clues towards all that. But this is in the meantime, this is what becomes his concern, that Egg was in a fight. And Sean, this is kind of interesting. It's sort of a refrain. It's the same sort of thing that Egg is getting upset about. People talking about his family, people talking about his father in particular, and that really bothers him.
Was there a quote you want me to read here?
No, I was just pausing. So yeah, what did you think of this moment? It's pretty neat. You have a couple of things you cited about this scene that I think were worth discussing for sure.
Yeah, one thing was interesting is that at one point, Dunk chastising Egg. Egg's trying to justify why he got in this fight. And Dunk's like, "You think Prince Maekar needs a little boy to defend him. How many times has Dunk needed Egg to defend him? How many times has Dunk says? No, to be fair, it's not purely the little boy. It's his boot coming out, but his identity, which is another strong thing here. But hey, his identity as a prince could still defend his dad. Sir Dunk's still right. This isn't the time or place for him to like reveal his identity to defend his dad's honor to some random squires,
Yeah.
But it's still humorous, I thought.
It is. Yeah.
And another bit of irony in Dunk's mind when he's contemplating, Egg's actions here, he thinks, the truth. Let that be enough.
Yeah.
And that's generally is pretty good advice. I like that. Many times I appreciate Dunk's wisdom.
Yeah, this is
even
where
if
he shines.
questions
I
it.
think this is where he shines. Yeah.
But it is also ironic, given what seems to be Dunk's identity as not a true knight. What does it mean for him to know the truth and let that be enough? It's weird to think about how he processes in his own mind.
That's a good point.
The truth of his identity, if it's enough for him to have competed in these tournaments and be recognized as a knight, even if he hasn't really been dubbed officially.
That's a good point.
Will that matter one day?
That it might. Yeah, that's a great take. I like that a lot. I hadn't considered that as he's telling him to the truth. Well, you know the truth too, and it's that's true.
Will that guilt get to him? In the same way the Egg eventually kind of burst out. My dad's not sulking, Eventually Dunk is going to be like, I'm thinking of the moment when in the office when they're cracking down on PR and Michael's, well, corporate says I can't tell any more jokes. And Jim is like, oh man, you were always so good. And Michael's like,
you left me satisfied.
That's what she said. I'm not really a knight. Dunk's gonna come out with it.
Yeah, this is how Egg is with. You're right. This is Egg when the Squires are talking about his dad. He's like, I can't. Except it's not. Instead of a joke, he's holding back. It's a punch.
Yeah. He's not sulking.
Yeah, he's not sulking. I'll punch you. Yeah, I'll show you sulking. And so that's a good catch there, Sean. And it's also funny too because while he doesn't need a boy to defend him, he needs his advice pretty badly. Egg's advice has been pretty clutch several times, though Dunk doesn't always take it. Like here, he doesn't take his advice not to enter the joust, and that really, well, it ended up working out.
Yeah.
But Egg was 100% correct. As for the truth thing, I was gonna say he's like. It's like I know the false. Let that be enough. Everyone else knows the lie. Let's leave it there. What were you gonna say?
It still might have worked out, even if he didn't join a tournament. He still could have gone to the tournament, been a witness to these things happening. Egg still might have gotten some trouble. Who knows how the butterfly effect would have played out? But Maynard Plum probably still would have been suspicious about Dunk's presence, even if he didn't enter the list.
Yeah,
so
pretty sure that he didn't need to have his head almost taken off for all that other stuff to happen. But it probably did help a little bit to see that Maynard probably figures it out anyway. But seeing that someone paid to have him killed was probably a good thing, in terms of sealing the deal there. Like, okay, someone just paid to kill that guy because he, he probably figured out the Snail didn't do that by accident. That was like a well-placed blow. He's watched the Snail joust a few times. Like this guy's knows his business. So yeah, that's definitely something that could catch the eye. But as we said, there's so many other pieces of evidence. That one wasn't exactly crucial. It was just part of the whole pastiche of evidence, I suppose. It's kind of interesting too. Squires, just in general, hedge knights having squires isn't exactly typical, right? Like you wouldn't expect it to be typical. You give that little thought, like hedge knights are poor, squires require equipment too. If you can squire for someone, generally you might have a better opportunity squiring for someone with a little more money. Someone's a little higher up on the social ladder. There's usually those kind of options. It's like interning. Like if you're going to intern with some company for your career, you generally intern with the best company you can find. Now, Dunk is great. I'm not saying he's not, obviously, but from the outside, a lot of people would look at him and be like, well, this is not a great opportunity. Obviously, Maekar was sold on it because he's a little different, and we would agree with that reasoning, but in this world, culturally speaking, it looks like he's sort of taking an internship at a kind of a low level company, one that doesn't offer great opportunities for advancement. We know
there's always exceptions
Yeah.
and variations, right? You might intern for a smaller company because your uncle works there, or it's up the street from you or something like that. So.
Yeah, that's true. And Dunk, and obviously Egg isn't in this he doesn't need the advancement, right? He's a freaking royal. That road's already paved. The red carpet's already rolled out for him. He's trying to learn the kinds of, in a way, it is the inverse. Like, you can't learn the things that he's been born with, but almost in his position, it's really hard to learn the things he's learning from Dunk born. It's sort of like a inverse, birth station thing. Like, he's so far above these things that it's hard for him to learn them, but he wants to, and that says a lot about his character.
It's a unique opportunity. It makes him a unique leader.
Yeah.
As he grows,
And meanwhile, the fiddler, yet more evidence, as if there isn't just unending evidence that he's got lots of money. When he's getting ready for his third or fourth match, he's got 3 squires helping him get dressed. Now, come on. One squire's already and they're helping him wear his, golden armor and his putting on all his make sure all 15 of my black diamonds are arrayed properly. Jeez, man. But it is kind of neat too. Nina writes a good take here about Egg defending his father. It's neat too because so many of these characters here don't have fathers. Like, Dunk doesn't know who his dad is. Bloodraven's dad was awful. So many of these characters have bad dads or no dads. Dunk's father figure was Arlen, so that's sort of something. But fathers and their sons, or father figures, a big theme here. And this is one of the few examples of someone standing up for their father rather than the other way around. Usually, it's the dads that have to stand up for their sons, or for their daughters, or mothers standing up for their kids, etc. It's usually how that goes, right? The parents are usually more capable, the kids are younger and don't have as much ability to do such things until they get to a certain age. So that's kind of neat. It's a sort of an inversion of that, or at least it pairs with the theme nicely. Also, though, besides Dunk being concerned about just Egg getting into fights, I don't think he's terribly worried about injury, right? He's worried about identity, right? Egg says, I hit him good. So whoever he hit good, which would be Sir Malor's squire. Now, we don't know who Sir Malor is. We do know that the other squire was Sir Adam, and that's one of the Freys. So, follow this chain here. Sir Malor gets a punch in the face, too. So he's got a mark. So his knight is going to be like, well, who punched you? Just like Dunk is asking Egg who punched you. And, well, that might raise questions, right? Like, well, why is this squire mad about someone talking about Maekar? Like, this is a tournament full of Blackfire loyalists. People should hate Maekar, right? This is the enemy commander. This was the anvil, right, for on the red grass field. A big, powerful commander, a guy they're all going to be worried about if it comes to war. So, that probably won't get back to this night. But it might, right? And that's the kind of thing, exactly what Dunk's worried about. Like, don't raise these questions. Don't give people reason to ask questions. And, well, yep, that's that.
That may have been at least a spark of what got Egg abducted.
Yeah,
right.
That's
he brought attention to himself there. It might have raised some questions. People already recognizing Dunk, at least physically. We don't need to see the details of all that, how all that happened in the background, but you can see how those pieces would come together.
Absolutely. And once again, these guys, it's hard for them to sort of fade into the crowd, right? You've got the huge dude and the bald kid. Like, they just can't hide. So it's like, which squire was it? And I don't remember what he looks like. No, it was the bald kid. It's the easiest.
They might be they might be 2 of the most recognizable people there.
Yeah. That's so funny.
Many people there are maybe trying to keep their identities hidden, but they're maybe the most naive about the idea of actually being able to do it.
Yeah. So this time, it's a callback to the beginning of the story, the heraldry. At the beginning, it's almost rude the way Egg is like, mocking Dunk for mixing up the phrase and the peak sigils, which, to be fair, they are pretty different. They just have one small thing in common. The colors are really different. But anyway, he's still kind of rude about it. Like, of course, that's the, because was taught all these things. He knows the sigils quite well. So it's kind of like holding it over Dunk that didn't have that education. And Dunk, fires back at him like, you sound like a proper princeling, reminding him of his bias there. He's like, oh, yeah, I was taught all that. You weren't. Okay. I will try not to make too much fun of you then. But here it's a lot more efficient, a lot more to the point. He's using his knowledge to delve farther into the mysteries that are surrounding them here. As the Sunderland sigil, that's a big note here. The Sunderlands are from the Three Sisters. That's really far away. And they're an island nation that is poor, not particularly notable for things like jousting and all that. So come back to that in a minute. But this is nicely set up by some past examples that we've seen. One thing Dunk suggests is Sunderlands, they must be kin to the bride or something for them to have come that far, because he's not thinking conspiratorially here. And Egg's like, nope, that's not the case either. And meanwhile, you've got people like the Brackens and the Tullys who are close and prominent, yet they didn't come. Yet you have this sort of obscure house coming from far away, traveling a long way to get there. And, well, what's that all about? Now, it's a similar situation. Nina reminds us back in Harrenhal, she sees Harrion Karstark, a prisoner there. Harrion Karstark's the heir to Karhold, even after Alice Karstark has married the Magnar of Then up there. Technically, her brother's still the heir. It's just that it's kind of believed that he might not make it back. He might be dead. From their perspective, he may already be dead. But Arya didn't pay a lot of attention to sigils like Sansa did. So she's not able to tell who he is. She describes the sigil so the reader can know, but she doesn't recognize that it's another Northman. And if she had, that might have affected her behavior. She might have tried to talk to him like, oh, that's another Northman or something. But she didn't even I don't know who that is. I don't recognize that sigil. So it does actually matter, knowing where someone's from, even if it's just knowing what region they come from can make a pretty big difference.
Knowledge is power.
Right on.
That's an example of it.
Now let's talk about a different parallel sticking with the Starks. Jon Snow, he's a really good example of someone who couldn't keep quiet, couldn't keep it to himself when people were talking bad about his father, especially Alliser Thorne, right? That's really similar here because it's Maekar is Egg's father. Jon isn't technically Ned's son, but given in terms of what people think, what he thinks, it's his father, certainly his father figure. And so they're defending their father's honor. Someone is calling their father a kinslayer or a traitor or both. Very similar types of insults or accusations of treason against the royal family. And this parallel is really enriched by Alliser Thorne's backstory. Do you remember, Sean, why Alliser Thorne is on the wall? Do you recall what his origin story in that regard is?
I don't quite. Was he mixed up in some sort of revolt? Was he part of the Greyjoys or something?
No, he was. He was on the wrong side of Robert's Rebellion. Just straightforward as that. Yeah, okay. He was on. He took Aerys' side. The Thorns were loyalists. So when he was on the losing side, he ended up on the wall. So that's part of why he hates Ned Stark, because Ned Stark was a rebel leader, right? He's one of the reasons that he's on the wall now, and that's his son. So he's taking out his frustration on Ned Stark's the traitor's bastard, as he said. So that's a really big connection, because that's part of why some of these squires hate Maekar and the Targaryens, because they're on the losing side of the Blackfire Rebellion. That certainly their houses all suffered for being on the losing side of the rebellion. Loss of wealth, loss of heads, whatever.
And maybe more than they would have during Robert's Rebellion too.
Yeah.
In fact, this is like a stretch back, but I seem to remember at one point we were dancing around the topic, and we never quite punched the point of the difference between how Robert treated traitors after the rebellion, how different it was.
That's true.
Robert was, for all his faults, that was one, I think, wise thing that he did was not be particularly retributive against all the traitors.
Yeah, and he's a rebel himself. Like, technically, they were the usurpers, whereas the Blackfires were the rebels, but they lost. So it's kind of like that part's reversed, where the rebels won in Robert's case. So it's a bit harder to call. You can still call people who weren't on their side traitors, but it's a little harder of an argument to make, in my opinion. But still, you're still right. It doesn't change your point that Robert
also
handled it.
Yeah, it does make it easier for Robert too when he was not only when he was the rebel, but also it's not like he had it out for everyone that supported Targaryens.
Just the Targaryens. Yeah, he really did have it out for them, but not the rest. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Not even all the Targaryens, just Aerys, really.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true.
In fact, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but sometimes I scratch my head and think about who was supporting the Targaryens. I feel like there was way more support for Robert than for Aerys, but maybe I'm just unaware of how many, especially of the troops close to Aerys, would have been in support of him. But like the Lannisters were neutral at best.
Yep,
right.
The Lannisters only took the side right at the end. Yep.
The Vale, I think, was kind of neutral.
Well,
Dorne
the Reach were loyalists, and the Reach is huge, so that's one
huge
thing,
and wealthy. So yeah.
And there were and Dorne was mostly on the Targaryen side, that they were a little reluctant, but that's their family. That's the Elia Martell. I mean, the Martells were married in, so they had that going for them as well. But yeah, you're right. It was more. The rebels did have more of the kingdoms, which doesn't necessarily mean they had more troops, but you're right. Like, in terms of just things you can name, there's more names on the rebel side. But yeah,
I think
you also have Aerys 2 and Aerys 1 here, although the first Blackfire Rebellion, Aerys wasn't king yet, but still, that's kind of a fun little connection.
I was partly sparked to think about it when thinking about the what if scenarios that Eustace was going through. I similarly, certain things that happened in Robert's Rebellion, if they hadn't gone quite right, I think Robert's Rebellion was just going to end up winning anyway. I'm not sure, but especially given certain hindsight things, like once it started to tip a little, Tywin was going to jump in on that side.
Yeah,
so.
That's true. That's very true. He just wanted, and it seemed like that was the way it was going to go, for so many reasons. Now, if we stay on topic with Jon Snow, there's another great connection leading us to another subtopic here.
Stay on topic.
Yeah, right. Can we? Now, Jon stays, of course, travels with Corran Halfhand and his band, one of whom is the elite archer Squire Dalbridge. Dalbridge was squire to King Jaehaerys II. That's Egg's second son. So, that's cool, huh? So Squire Dalbridge, of course, gives his life to buy the rest of the squad more time. With that and his incredible skill with the bow, it's pretty clear that this is a good example of someone who was never a knight, but not due to lack of ability, right? This guy's brave. He gives his life to save his friends just without question. And obviously, like I said, his skill with the bow is almost unmatched. And let alone the fact he chose to be a king's squire. That's not normal either, right? You got to be special for that. Normally, that's a factor of being highborn. Like, it's you see the squires for the king be from the top families. This guy's not. We don't know what family he's even from, which implies even more ability, because it wasn't his place in his rank, his family's rank, that got him there. We don't even know what family he's a part of. If it was a big name, we would probably know it. Like, if this guy was a Lannister, we would know it.
Do we know about how old he was? Was he like 16 or 36?
He would have had to be pretty young, because Squire, we don't know for sure. No, he would have had to be in at least 8, because that's as young as a squire could be. But he could have been an older squire, which is part of what we're segueing to, the age of a squire, and the fact that squire, sometimes that's their career. Just because you're a squire doesn't mean you're young. They can start that young, but that doesn't always mean you. Not all squires stay that way. So what I'm wondering, too, is about this guy, Squire Dalbridge. Maybe he won, like, an archery contest to distinguish himself, like Anguy did at the Hands tournament. But he took the black, probably when his king died. Jaehaerys didn't last very long. He died in his late 30s. My guess is that Dalbridge was, like a lot of these guys, he wanted to be a Kingsguard. He's a squire to the king at a young age. Probably, like I said, it wasn't because of family connections, likely, so he probably really wanted this. But he never even became a knight. So let alone Kingsguard. So that's a really interesting thing. Now, here's a quote from George R. Martin about squires to sort of illuminate what we're talking about here, about how they can really take it. You shouldn't just think about them as young men. Here you go.
We tend to think of squires as teenage boys, knights in training. That is only part of the truth. Historically, there were many men who spent their entire lives as squires and never became knights. It was quite common to have 30, 40-year-old squires, even some in their 50s. Such men perhaps did not have the wealth to become knights. Knights had to pay for their own equipment, or perhaps did not have the inclination. They were the medieval counterparts of the career army sergeant who has no desire to be promoted to lieutenant, let alone general.
Right. So that you, having been in the military, might have a little extra insight here.
I do, and I don't want to take away from Martin's point, but it's slightly off base. I don't know quite how to say it, but like a career army sergeant is a highly trained, college-educated leader of hundreds, maybe thousands of men. Maybe like a buck sergeant who just got promoted might only be in charge of 5 or 10.
Squire's not in charge of anybody but equipment.
Right. It's not the best analogy because, interesting, by the way, the word sergeant comes from the word servant. And originally sergeants were servants. They were like assistants to officers, and officers basically were wealthy, right?
Yeah.
You would have a wealthy person bought horses and swords, so now I'm a leader, where they would have, the soldiers that they were leaders of would have years of experience fighting with their sword, or maybe not, maybe they'd just be farmers, you could see a range. But in a modern army, what happens is an 18-year-old, we'll say 2 different 18-year-olds. One joins the army, or private, and they go through basic and they get trained with radios and Humvees and M16s. And after 4 years, they're a sergeant. Whereas another 18-year-old goes to college and spends 4 years studying history and management and then gets commissioned as a lieutenant. The lieutenant technically is going to be put in charge of a platoon, and he'll be higher ranked than the sergeant. But that sergeant knows more than that lieutenant. Does that make sense? He's been in the unit for 4 years, or in the army. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so sergeants are sort of like this parallel leadership chain along with officers. And being a career sergeant isn't someone who's like avoiding the responsibility or leadership of an officer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's just another route,
Yeah.
It's kind of like saying he wanted to be a career lawyer instead of a judge. Well, it's just a different thing, I don't know. I don't know if that's the best analogy.
No, I think that works pretty well. Yeah, I think you delineated that pretty well. That certainly helps me understand it better.
And you could see squires might go similarly, right? Like, especially like the noble squires, as young boys, they squire some knight just so they can get some training and have some idea what they're doing as a knight, so they don't look like fools. Some of them may or may not actually do. Some may become knights anyway and really not know anything about fighting, but just because they're rich or their dad wanted it or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Whereas some squires who maybe, if they're not necessarily related to wealth or land or anything like that, after a squire for 10 or 20 years, they might be very, very proficient and respected at their job.
That's true.
But they just aren't rich, so they can't be a knight, or they don't have royal blood or whatever. Another similar parallel, Navy SEALs, they're not officers, they're sergeants. They're the most trained, expert fighters and soldiers in the military. Usually are not officers, or more leaders.
Yeah, they're
soldier. This enlisted men are more fighting, but among the enlisted men, there are still leaders among them too. So
right. Okay. Cool. That's very helpful. Yeah. And another example right here in the story, we have the man that taught Glendon his arms training. It wasn't a knight. He was knighted by some guy, Morgan Dunstable, in exchange for favors from the brothel women there. But the guy who actually taught Glendon how to fight was a squire, so he couldn't knight him, but otherwise he would have. So clearly this dude that taught Glendon knew his business. If Glendon's skill is any evidence of it, which I think it is, like, he's not all talent, right? He's certainly someone taught him some things, and he's quite good at it. So that just goes to show, like what you're saying, like, had some more well-educated guy taught Glendon, well, he might have learned a wider variety of things, but he might not have taught him jousting as well, or horsemanship. Someone that's just like constantly around horses and all that might have gotten a better education from someone that's just doing it every day. So that's really interesting. Now, when Egg does say, because they talk about the Sunderlands and they still get back to the topic about what Dunk overheard in an oblique manner. He says, Egg says, "This is a traitor's tourney, sir." And in the first of what are many quotes that we're going to read today in a voice that isn't the intended voice written by George R. Martin, I'm going to say that this Dunk's response is meant to sound a bit like Monty Python. Like, what? All of them? And so, yeah, but pretty much, yeah, almost all of them. So one of the things about it, too, is this is one of the things that really gets me, is do these people not know how much of a target they are? Like, if I'm Bloodraven, if Gorman Peak travels anywhere, I want to know about it. Like, if he's whatever he's doing, I want to know about it. So if he's traveling to this tournament, that alone, like, I don't care who else is there, that alone is like raises the red flags or the black flags, whichever metaphor works here. So, but then you have even more like the Sunderlands. This is in a way, in a way, this is even more outlandish, them traveling there, and just even more like there's only one reason they could be there. It's like, because you think about where they had to go. They're in the Three Sisters. Think about this. Nina, this is a good catch by Nina. When we see the Sunderlands in the Elaine chapter in The Winds of Winter, because there's a tournament happening there. So it's a good, pretty good parallel, pretty good example to compare. Miranda Royce is like, I can't believe they showed up. She's surprised they showed up, and they're way closer to that tournament. And it's not a traders tournament, right? It's just a tournament for the Winged Knights or what have you. I mean, it may become a traders thing, but it isn't so obviously that on the outside. It's everyone in the Vale is there. So that's just really funny that it's wild that they that they showed up there. She's questioning that they showed up there because they're poor. They're not that into jousting. And so they probably had to sail from all the way to Gulltown or to Maidenpool or maybe King's Landing and then travel overland all this way around the God's Eye. It's like, yeah. So, yeah, go ahead.
Something that the first time reading this, I was a little, obviously there's so much, this is so thick of a story and a mystery that I hadn't pieced it all together yet. But I was like, how does Bloodraven have an army all ready to go already? It's like coming together at the end. Like, I don't know. I kind of like, can't think of the word. Like I couldn't quite swallow that at first. But the more we read, the more we realize how far ahead of this Bloodraven was.
Yeah.
And
it's true.
And to that end, I want to point out the value of intelligence. I was in intelligence when I was in the army, and think about all these clues here that make it seem so obvious and allow Bloodraven to get ahead of it. But if he didn't have intelligence, if he wasn't making an effort, if he didn't have 1,000 eyes in one, he wouldn't have known. He wouldn't have known the Sunderlands were there. He wouldn't know what Peak was doing. And so think how many lives were saved by Bloodraven just being aware ahead of time, having the intelligence of what was going down here and being ready for it.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, like those clues would have been there, but he wouldn't have been able to pick up on them. He wouldn't be aware of them. The clues wouldn't have made it to his eyes or ears to consider. And like, oh, yeah.
It's way more valuable to know where to deploy 100 men than to have 400 men.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
400 men off in some castle where there's no battle is nowhere near as valuable as 100 men at the castle where the battle is.
So the Sunderlands are here to rise for Daemon like everybody else, but it's interesting to see just how bought in they are because like most of these other houses are probably like, yeah, we'll see how it goes. We'll join you if it goes well. But including people who are a lot closer geographically. So these guys spend a lot of money to come lose badly. Because they obviously aren't coming for the joust. They're not coming for the egg. Because they know already that they're not getting the egg. And Davos shows up there. Remember, not at this tournament, obviously. But in Dance with Dragons. And it's remarked how poor they are comparatively because of the same thing, because they can't smuggle anymore. That was their main source of income. So they're fish lords now. And he's like, do you know how many fish you have to sell for one suit of armor? Or that joke might get made by Miranda Royce. But same point. And another way that they're basically fish lords is that they have webbed fingers and mysterious connections to the deep ones. So they might literally be fish lords, but Dunk says they eat fish on the Three Sisters, don't they? And, well, yeah, they do. Like pretty much anyone on an island, they do eat fish. That's like when he says, was I unhorsed? after he
Like,
wakes
does
up.
egg not eat fish?
Yeah. So, and then to deepen this whole little mini scenario, this is what Lord Burrell says of Lord Sunderland to Davos. Quote.
Oh, I've lost the spot. Let me see.
Yeah.
Okay. I used to curse the gods who gave me only daughters until I heard Tristan bemoaning the cost of destriers. You'll be surprised to know how many fish it takes to buy a decent suit of plate mail.
I don't know that I would be surprised. It's going to be some huge
Yeah.
amount. But let's not happen. Like, that's another reason that this really stands out. Okay, so they're poor. It takes a lot of fish to buy a decent suit of plate and mail. And
Or
what
one
happens when you
very
lose a
large
joust?
fish.
What's that?
Or one
Very large fish.
Yeah.
So you go there, you travel all that way, you lose a joust, and then you lose your plate mail and your sword and your horse. So that is just so many fish. But as we also know, what happens when you're a repeat offender rebel? Your punishment is really severe. So this long trip is truly a disaster, maybe more disastrous for anyone except Daemon himself, who traveled even farther for an even bigger failure. But these guys lost a lot of fish. Poor went out for the Sunderlands and all their lost fish income, if they weren't like executed or something, which is entirely possible as well. So, yeah, there you go. The Sunderlands, that's what we have to say about them. Let's talk about the gallows night, Dunk's sigil, and what that can tell us, and other discussion topics that emerge from it. The actual description is a hanged man swinging grim and gray beneath a gallows tree. Speaking of people getting executed, like maybe the Sunderlands or other people. And his presence is helping lead to more executions, I suppose. But as we said, probably most of them would have happened anyway. Now, this is something I find interesting about the whole life of a hedge knight. Like, he's got this shield simply because he couldn't afford to have it painted yet. He hasn't had time to have it painted yet. It's purely a logistics thing, right? He just... Like, I wonder how often this happens. How often does a hedge knight just not have their sigil handy because they can't afford to carry around 3 or 4 spare shields? Like, most knights have 1 extra shield or maybe more. Like, lords are going to have like a bunch of extra shields. They're never going to run out of stuff that has their sigil on it, right? It's just on everything. It's like Coca-Cola's not going to run out of stuff that's branded with their logo on it, right? But these guys...
I wonder how many hedge knights dabble in painting. So
that would be a good, useful skill to have, yeah.
Their shields.
Like sewing.
Or for a squire.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
yeah, that's a good point for a squire, yeah.
That's a very good point. Yeah, so like learning a variety of skills, there's another use for that here, having painting skills. Paint's expensive. It's not like, we can't think of it like modern times where paint's relatively cheap. Yeah, colors and paints are not so cheap, let alone the skill.
I mean, there could also be carvings.
That's true. Carvings, yeah. I guess that's the value of having a simple sigil. Dunk's sigil, not simple. You got to paint the star and the tree. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he that's one choice he made that makes it a little more difficult. It's not just like like a fireball. That's probably a little easier. So I guess one thing we could say about this is while he's choosing to be a mystery, he's kind of leaning into it. He's like, yeah, I may as well be a mystery knight. I don't have my sigil. He might not have chosen to be a mystery knight if he had his regular shield, a copy of it. So I wonder if like other hedge knights just lean into this. Like, well, I don't have my sigil, so let's be a mystery knight. People like that, so let's do it,
That's Damon just forgot his shield with his sigil on it. So I guess I'll be the fiddler.
Yeah, I grabbed the wrong shield. I meant to grab the black dragon, and I accidentally grabbed the fiddle. So
good enough. Just run with it.
Yeah, just run with it. The Black Fiddle Rebellion.
You didn't forget the sword, did you? Ooh.
That's going to be a problem. So this is another thing that's so funny. He's like, well, I don't have my sigil, so they're not going to know who I am. Yeah, right, Dunk. Come on.
You have to give me 3 seconds. I have a technical issue real quick.
Okay, cool. We've got other stuff we can talk about. So here I would say he wakes up and, he's got a little bit of a hangover. Okay. Which is kind of funny because this hangover he has is nothing compared to the lance to the face hangover he's going to have. It's like a warm-up for a bigger hangover. Dunk takes
you think your head hurts now.
Yeah, Dunk takes a beating in this story. And then he's like, he has a hangover, then he gets slammed in the head, then he gets stabbed in the arm and loses a bunch of blood, then he fights Black Tom. It's like, geez. But hey, he comes out of it. He's Dunk. He's good.
He would have 18 constitution if he was a D&D character.
That's true. And probably the 18 strength too, yeah.
Whatever max hit points, and yeah.
His wisdom wouldn't be super high. Or no, his wisdom would be kind of high. His intelligence would be low. Which one would be high? Which one would be low?
I don't think they would be super low or high, right?
Yeah.
They'd probably 12 or 13, you know what I mean? He would think he has 8, right? But I think he would be a good character. He would be...
Yeah.
He got some lucky rolls.
Pretty high charisma too. Like people like him. Like the women love him, and Egg loves him. Like people
charisma,
like him.
Dexterity. He hits on all bases.
Yeah.
Maybe dexterity might be also kind of medium.
Yeah, he would
not low, right? He's quick.
He is quicker than he seems.
It's pointed out several times.
Yeah, because he's got the scrapping skills. Yeah, you're right. So here, but this is where the wisdom, you would say, is a strike against his wisdom anyway. When he's over focused on like what he could win, he's like, oh, all I got to do is win once, and I'm gonna win a suit of armor and a new horse. It's like, you really should think about the opposite though, and how unlikely you are to win, right? He's like,
yeah. To be fair, it's a very common wisdom mistake or whatever.
That's true.
Just people in general often think way more about how good or bad something is if it happens, without thinking of it relative to the likelihood of it happening.
Yeah.
And some of this is even like, I don't know, natural or understandable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the fears that people have of, being eaten by a shark or something like that. So they don't want to go swimming, but really you're way more likely to get in a car accident, but you still drive your car around. So there's not only like how good or bad it is if it happens, the likelihood of it happening, but also the value you get from doing or not doing some task. And Dunk's not really thinking about any of that. He's not thinking about how bad it is if he loses his horse and his armor. He's not thinking about how much more experience these other knights have, or how poorly he did at the last jousting. Or wait, no, he never actually got the joust last time. Oh, he did. Yeah, he did.
He jousted in
Trial of the
for
Seven.
real. Yeah, he didn't do a tournament joust. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So that's a really good take. Well point there, Sean. He's thinking also culturally. It's just encouraged. Like men are supposed to be warriors in this society, which means you take chances, means you put yourself out there. You don't sitting there and waiting for your moment isn't manly in this society. So that's, I think, part of it too, is Dunk is like, you're encouraged to think about the rewards and not what could go wrong. It's not necessarily great for morale. In this case, it would have been a good time to think things through. But yeah, there's a lot of men in the society are sort of given the soldier's attitude, like face what comes, don't think about it too much, if you think about it too much, it's just going to make you more scared. Egg, of course, not naive at all about this anyway. Other things, sure, but he is 100% like set. Dunk, you're making a mistake, but he just can't argue him out of it. Is a good semi jokey line that segues us into another subtopic here. Quote.
Oh, sorry, I'm not sure where you are.
It's not as if I faced the laughing storm. Is there some knight here like to give me trouble?
Almost all of them, sir.
I owe you a clout in the ear for that. Ser Uther is 10 years my senior and half my size.
So perfect example, right? This is very naive. Uthor's going to laugh like a few paragraphs later at the notion that size matters at all. He's like, he's half my size. I'm like, yeah, well, dude, size is irrelevant. It's one of those times where size does not matter. Length does, though. All the euphemisms coming out here. And not to mention age doesn't really matter much either. In fact, age might help. Like Uthor's age might be an advantage because of experience, right? He's had more experience jousting. His aim with his lance is elite. And
it's like a sliding scale of all these factors of size and experience and skill and everything. Like, if you're at some point, like if you're in a wrestling match, if one person's 200 pounds and one person's 100 pounds, it doesn't matter how good that 100-pound wrestler is. They just can't manage someone twice their size.
Yeah.
But 140, 160, and same thing with the age. Like most of, the best marathon runners, the best football players, they're 30 years old. Not 20 years old.
Yeah.
Even if the 20-year-old might be stronger, or in some facets, the experience, how to pace yourself, the skills that you learn along the way, they start to outweigh. But once you get to be 50, There aren't many 50-year-old marathon runners. There's no 50-year-old football players.
Yeah, it starts to decline. You're right.
No matter how experienced they are, they still need a certain amount of strength to keep up.
Things that you can keep adding skill over the years. You're right. Like bodybuilder is another good example because you just cannot add like 50 pounds of muscle when you're 20. It's that you add a few pounds a year until you keep going. So by the time you're 40, you're not as fast as you were when you're 40, when you're 20, but you can, if you keep adding muscle, you can have way more muscle at that age than when you were when you're younger.
And you could probably take this analogy in other directions too, but like even if you could theoretically just suddenly add 50 pounds of muscle when you're 20, your tendons aren't strong enough to support it.
Yeah,
right. You need all these other aspects to go along with it.
Like you can add the muscle quicker when you're in your 20s, but you just the progress of continually adding it, all that work adds up where you can't just jam that into a year or two. And the same thing is said, like we've heard this about the real world for marksmen, for example, archers in the real world, like the Persian Empire, famous for its archers, and it was said that the best archers were in their early 40s because they had 20 years of shooting a bow, and it was before their, like you said, before some of their physical skills just started to decline. Their body starts to go the other direction, but their skill set is just so built up. It's so honed, like the fluidity of their motion, the repetition, the expert level of having done something tens of thousands of times. It's really neat. Musicians too is another example of that.
Yeah.
Something you practice and practice and practice, and there's no making up for that.
I saw Iron Maiden's drummer recently. I'm having a little while ago now that I think
Nico
about it.
McBrain? Yeah, what a great name he has.
He was barely moving. He was like talking to someone. He was like drumming, just you imagine
so
just metal drumming.
Yeah.
And his wrists were kind of flicking. He's like, so anyway, last week I went to the pub and like I was like, holy crap, he's just like exploding sound out effortlessly. It was amazing.
And he's in like his 60s.
Or...
Yeah, because Iron Maiden started in the late 70s. Yeah. Like they're still impressive.
Yeah.
They're still impressive. That's what happens when you're a very professional band that never does drugs. They just kept on working. Anyway, that's pretty far off topic. So, but it's also a foreshadowing joke here, right? It's not as if I faced the laughing storm. Now, we talked about that a little bit before, but let's review. It's joke shadowing. We need a word. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
We need a word for this. When it's foreshadowing, but it's a joke. Joke shadowing is my take, but I think we can do better than that. Now, Sean, you had an idea, right?
High five shadowing?
High five.
Am I right?
Foreshadowing. That's pretty good. So, just to recap, we did talk about this briefly. Like I said, Dunk is going to win a trial by combat against the Laughing Storm much later, which are under much tighter circumstances. This isn't a tournament. It's give up your rebellion, because he rebels after a broken arranged marriage. This includes the incident where Olenna, the Queen of Thorns, claims to have ended her Targaryen betrothal, though she's probably lying because she was 9 when this happened, and her betrothed was an adult gay man, so most likely he broke it off. So she was probably just saving face, but, whatever. That didn't start the war. It was Duncan the Small, the guy, Duncan, or named after Duncan the Tall, Egg's first son, the one who rejects his inheritance as heir to the throne for Jenny of Oldstones, with, the one with the awesomely sad song. And, of course, this is settled by Ormond Baratheon, who might have been the Laughing Storm's son. It's actually not clear if he was. He might have been like a nephew or something. Probably his son, though, marries Raelle, which is Egg's daughter. And that, again, is the source of Robert, Stannis, and Renly's recent Targaryen blood. That's Ormond and Raelle are their grandparents. So most of you probably knew that already, but it's important to recap that. And now, because the Blackfires are such a big part of this story, more so than the Baratheons are in their era that we're talking about, or especially in this era, it was the 5th Blackfire Rebellion that saw the death of Lord Ormond, and he was slain by Maelys Blackfire, leading the very Golden Company that will be formed within months of this short story. And that's all about 27 years later, when Egg has been king for about 6 years. So it's a long journey from Hedge Knight in disguise as a Mystery Knight to Kingsguard, champion of the Iron Throne, but all of it is contained in that quote, pretty much, or in the context of that quote, and with the specific naming of the Laughing Storm. So that's pretty darn cool. George sometimes gets flack for not planning things out, but clearly he's planned a lot of things. I mean, that is a lot of detail across a lot of generations with a lot of characters. So You know,
I think if anything, he plans too many things out.
that's yeah. Well, I won't argue with that. It's good for us though, but you're right. You could be right. So that's a whole lot of famous descendants and famous family. Now we switch gears to the Snail, who Dunk's about to face in the tournament, who he says, "Ha, I'm glad I'm facing him." As far as we know, the Snail doesn't have any famous descendants that we know of, but the Snail was paid to kill him, so that's another irony here. He's like, I'm not worried about him. I'm not worried about the guy that was paid to kill me. And we learn later that it was Alan Cockshaw who pays to kill him. And this is funny, almost, because is all this possibly like, oh, this is the guy that was responsible for Baelor's death. This is the guy that did this. This is the guy who's, got the Targaryen kid with him. It's none of that. It's just because of jealousy. Daemon's attracted to Dunk. Alan is not cool with that. He wants him for himself. And that's the whole thing. It could have been all these conspiracies. But no, it's just simple jealousy. And you know what? I appreciate that. George R. R. Martin includes a lot of that in these stories. And, sometimes what could be a big conspiracy is really just something petty. And I think that's realistic, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah, like you...
Not muted, am I?
No.
Okay.
There.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot of times. There are potentially, grand reasons for something, but really it's something petty.
Yeah, like a big conspiracy theory of all things. Nah.
Or sometimes maybe not even petty, but coincidental, or accidental, even.
So let me use an example of something from another fandom. I'm reading some. I love to read Star Wars novels, and there's an example talking about the Emperor, where they're like, someone's talking about the Emperor's grand plans and his vision for the galaxy and all this stuff, and this one person's like, that may be true, but let me give you another suggestion. Maybe the Emperor was just a really petty guy. He's like, he's a petty man full of jealousies and insecurities, and he loved to punish people and be cruel to them from a position of power. And like, yeah. That's at least part of it. Like, how you can't argue with that. Like, at least that it may not be like the whole thing, but it's probably a big part of his personality. Like, yeah, like these big, powerful beings are not immune. In fact, often more susceptible to these petty jealousies and things that
sometimes they're driven by insecurity.
Yeah. They hide it really well because, well, they're capable in a lot of ways. It's not like people like that rise that high. They have to have skills. So, yeah, it's a pretty interesting human condition topic to consider. So let's move on to the actual tournament here. Nina notes that the heat is probably not a coincidence. George probably made that on purpose to fit in with the Dragon Dream theme that's happening. After all, you need extreme heat to hatch a dragon egg, and the prophecy / dream is that an egg will hatch at White Walls. Well, we of course have Dany putting her eggs in the brazier, and the wildfire at Summerhall might be a similar example of that. So that's pretty cool. That's a pretty subtle little thing going on, but I wondered why George decided to write the day as really hot. And, well, Nina provides us with an option that I very much like. What do you think of that?
I hadn't really considered it, but it is worth considering. We've pointed out many times how good writers in general, and Martin for sure, seem to have a reason for every word they stick in there. Just now bringing it up, I wonder if maybe it's to create some contrast. It starts raining later.
Yeah, that's true. With the mud and all that, yeah. It's certainly been a big part of the other stories, right? Like the rain.
The way storms come are usually like the meeting of two, hot and cold or low and high pressure systems. So, we have this heat and rain's about to come, a storm's going to break,
Yeah. One point from the beginning here, Kyle the Cat losing on purpose in a tournament full of people getting bribed to lose on purpose. He doesn't get anything for it. It's like, oh man, that is bad luck, dude.
I think you pointed out in here somewhere too that in hindsight, he would have so much better off being paired against someone else.
Yeah.
Like he thinks he's lucky to get this pairing. Because if he had, he could have beat them and proven himself, maybe gotten noticed. Even if he ends up throwing it to Coswell, at least he got that one win first.
Yeah, then he would have had some like a ransom too to fall back on.
Yeah,
but yeah, he wouldn't have even had. You're right. He wouldn't have even had the idea. He wouldn't have come up with this stupid plan of losing on purpose if he wasn't paired against Caswell. He would have definitely not lost on purpose to someone else.
Yes, exactly.
Unless he was bribed.
You.
Right. Which either way, he's getting something. So that was, so both Dunk and Kyle are like, yeah, we got the best possible draw we could. I got Caswell, you got the Snail. And it's in both cases, it's the worst.
Like worst possible.
It's the worst possible. Yeah. It's really funny. But also, by the way, in terms of Kyle the Cat, I wonder, we talk about how Glendon, very good chance he goes with them at the end. He travels with them, but Kyle might as well too. Like he gets a reprieve probably because he sticks around. He's with Dunk, and Egg is like, he's like, hey, Bloodraven, give money for him. And he doesn't specifically mention Kyle, but Kyle's not going to be in trouble. Kyle didn't join the conspiracy. In fact, Kyle's even, he finds Kyle talking to Bloodraven afterwards, before he reveals himself. But so there's, in addition to the possibility that Kyle is actually a Bloodraven's agent, there's a chance that he's part of future stories, which I think
that's what I was going to say. It might be easier for Kyle to throw that match, even if it seems unwise, if it's part of a larger guise,
right.
If he is in cahoots with Bloodraven in the first place.
Like if he's trying to get inside a house to like be a household knight, it might be with the purpose of spying, right? That might be why he's trying to do that. Yeah.
And also, he's not really losing that much. If Bloodraven's gonna like if you lose your horse, I'll just give you another horse.
Absolutely, yeah, you're totally right. Like he's not actually,
or maybe even has 5 other horses. He's not necessarily a poor hedge knight in the first place.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. Yeah, well point. Nina also points out that considering Kyle's case again, how often does intentional losing happen during jousting? I mean, Arthur probably didn't lose to Rhaegar. She uses that example. I agree with that. I don't think Arthur intentionally lost to Rhaegar. And say Barristan didn't lose to Rhaegar intentionally either. We have his internal monologue. We're like, man, if only I had beaten Rhaegar. He wishes he had won at the tournament. He doesn't think about, I shouldn't have taken that bribe. I shouldn't have lost on purpose. You'd think that if he did, and we had his inner monologue, we would know. So probably didn't do that. But another example we've cited in the past, Tywin may have suggested or told his bannermen to lose to Rhaegar at the tournament he hosted to celebrate Viserys' birth at Casterly Rock, which he planned on broaching the Cersei Rhaegar marriage offer after that. He's like, Rhaegar wins, then we bring up the marriage. It was all part of his plan. You would think that Tywin wouldn't leave that to chance. He's like, okay, brothers, lose on purpose. Okay, because it was specifically noted that it was a lot of Tywin's own men that were losing. So like, yeah, that I could buy, because there's a clear goal in mind here. It's similar to this. Like they want this guy to win, and they don't want him to know it that he won. They want to pump him up. So, yeah.
Unclear in the first tournament that Dunk went to. That was Ashford Meadows, right?
Yes.
Like it seemed if either they were being thrown or rigged matchups to Valar.
Yeah, you're totally right. Yep, you're absolutely right. So it seems normal. It seems like, and this is we got a taste of that in that tournament. Here we got even more into the underbelly of all the different like types of cheating and different goals that people have under the radar.
I can tell you in card tournaments, a lot of times it's not necessarily even underhanded, although often it is, but a lot of times people will throw matches to like their friend or their teammate. So when they think like, I might be able to beat you right now, but you have a better chance in the long run of this tournament, your matchup or your energy level or whatever other reasons there might be for it. So I don't know how to define normal, but if it's happening 10% of the time, I don't know, that's normal.
So Dunk's suspicions help get the reader thinking. It's kind of a pattern. Dunk gets a little suspicious about something. He's not on the right track. He doesn't think it all the way through. He doesn't have the right information, but it helps raise our suspicions a little bit. And here's another quote about him being kind of close, but not quite. Do you have this one ready? Dunk wondered.
Yes. Dunk wondered if the Master of Games was deliberately matching the Hedge Knights against each other, so no lordly need suffer the ignominy of losing to one in the first round.
Yeah. Nina points, Dunk, did you not just notice that Kyle was pitted against Joffrey Caswell? Right. I mean, right then, there's other examples. That's probably not the best observation, but still he's right to be considering this. Yeah. He's
at least like, it's clicking in his head. I wish I could remember in that first. Yeah, he did consider it in that first tournament too. He at least observed it. He may may have still been too naive to he was still in a point like, what an interesting coincidence, rather than this is rigged. His mind doesn't jump there. We talked about the idea of like projecting yourself. Dunk wouldn't do that, so he wouldn't think someone else would. But once it happens enough times, he starts to think maybe someone else is doing this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Minor trivia here. Nina notes a page and a fray are the first tilt that Dunk sees, and the pages and frays have a relationship in the modern series. The Jamos fray, which is an example of running out of names. Jamos. Yeah, I've never seen that name. I kind of like it.
You got jammed.
You got jammed. Jamos fray. That's Walter's 13th son. So again, when you're running out of names, you're like, I don't know, Jamos.
He seems like a fray, doesn't he? Jam from Parks and Recs.
Yeah, he does. And one of his, and that's a son by his Blackwood wife, and Jamos is gonna marry Sally Page. So there's the fray and the Page, and their eldest son is Big Walder. So there you go. Sir Glendon beats some guy named Sir Argrave the Defiant, who Dunk judges to be the tough older sort who knows his business. But Glendon takes him down easily, and that sets up, wow, Glendon's pretty darn good. Sir Argrave is from Nunney. That's the same town Eustace Osgrey once claimed was under their control, but hasn't been for a while. It's been outside of their control for a bit. Now, this is interesting, too, because it might be another example of someone who traveled pretty far. This is Golden Grove, which that's pretty far from the Reach, right? This is in we're in the Riverlands here. He would have probably been a warrior in the first Blackfire Rebellion. Anyone who's sort of grizzled almost certainly fought in the first rebellion too. So that's a consideration, and might be why he was chosen to be a household knight, because of he's shown his loyalty. Maybe he fought the Ironborn, maybe he's fought against Dagon, things like that. So even though Dunk is less skilled and knowledgeable about jousting than he thinks, he's right to be impressed by Sir Glendon, who is legitimately skilled and talented. He blazes through the lists, rolling overall on his path. And it's nice to see Dunk thinks of him internally as Fireball's son. In his brain, that's the phrase he uses, even as other people are laughing at Knight of the Pussy Willows, that title. Mm-hmm. So Glendon's doing the same thing Dunk did. Just like, he's taking a risk, and arguably a bigger risk in some ways, because Dunk notices he doesn't have proper armor. He doesn't have a proper faceplate. But unlike Dunk, Glendon's actually really good. He's actually quite skilled at this. So in that sense, it's much less of a risk.
By the way, I have to point out, even if Dunk isn't really a hedge knight, internally he thinks of himself as one.
That's true.
But time and time again, he always considers himself one.
That is true. That is true. So we just gave Dunk some praise for his emotional intelligence and some other things, but actually here, another line that's meant to be read in a different voice. This one will say Homer Simpson, who says, "Quick," Dunk snorted. "He has a snail on his shield. How quick can he be?"
Can he be quick?
Yeah. I don't do a good Homer, so, you got to imagine that one. But it's like he's being dismissive because of something that absolutely does not justify being dismissive. Like, you're judging him by his sigil? Like, I don't think that's a... But he really leans into that, doesn't he? Doesn't he, with the centaur guy, right?
He does it elsewhere, too. Yeah, I think it was Coswell was riding a centaur. I was like, he should do better than that. He should ride better if he's got a centaur on his shield. And it's, in a way, he's sort of right. Like, I think you've got another note on this, but I will point out that Martin does seem to put meaning into the sigils, right? Whether Dunk should read into it or not, Martin certainly seems to want us to.
Yeah.
And also, if Dunk had looked at it another way, which eventually he does, the snail sigil does fit. It should have been a warning. The snail hides in his shell. It's not his real identity, what he's revealing here.
Yeah. Yeah, some people say that Uthor is perhaps the most... he fills the definition of mystery knight as well as anyone in the story. He does. Dunk's a mystery knight. Uthor Underleaf is a mystery knight. Damon's a mystery knight. Yeah, there's a lot of people that qualify for that, but Uthor's case is as strong as anyone's. Also, just as a note here for centaurs, there's the world of
Plum, by the way. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh yeah, Plum. Yeah,
Maynard Plum is a mystery
absolutely.
knight.
Yeah, you're right. And even Glendon, sort of in a way, like what's his heritage? Like who's his father? You know. So yeah, just different aspects of that. For others, it's a mystery why they're there. You know, different sort of. What's a mystery why this knight is here? He's not a mystery knight, but his purpose is. And quick note about centaurs in the world of Ice and Fire. There's a similar note to what we've seen in the real world, which is the myth of centaurs comes from people who hadn't seen horse riding before. There's a couple examples in real world history. For example, the first time people in South America saw horses brought over by the Europeans, because horses aren't native to South or North America. So they kind of thought it was one creature.
They thought the Spaniards were centaurs.
Yeah. And the ancient Greeks thought that a lot of people from Thessaly or the horse countries were centaurs, because they come from the hill countries where there's not as much horsing, not as much horsing around. So yeah, so there's a couple that like this sort of mythology exists in a couple of places. I just never seen something like that before. You've never seen a horse or a person on a horse, so you see it and you're like, well, that's just one creature. But yeah, so you're right. There's like a recurring theme of sometimes the author, sometimes the character, sometimes both, putting a lot of emphasis on sigils. And Illyrio, who is not from Westeros, has kind of a take on it from A Dance with Dragons, and it kind of sums it up pretty well here. And here's the line.
You Westerosis are all the same. You sew some beast upon a scrap of silk, and suddenly you are all lions or dragons or eagles. I could take you to a real lion, my little friend. The prince keeps a pride in his menagerie. Would you like to share a cage with them? Oh, is that the Lords of the Seven Kingdom did not make rather much of their sigils, Tyrion had to admit.
Did make rather much of their sigils, Tyrion had to admit. So he's like, Tyrion is shown here. Tyrion's been given the example. Is like, yeah, I guess you're kind of right, Illyrio. We do kind of make too much of a big deal out of that. And he's like, yeah, all right, fine. Well point, Illyrio. And it's not just the Lords doing that, though, clearly, because this is Dunk doing it. And, well, yeah, the Snail also grasps this concept, but he uses it to his advantage. We'll say it's a form of sigil aikido. Yes, using it to his advantage, using their prejudices against themselves, using it as a weapon. So let's talk about the Snail. Very interesting character. He's knocked out by the Snail. It's pretty brief this time there. He's with the Maester like 4 hours, which is like, man, you really recovered quickly. Dunk is a very tough man. You're right to give him that 18 constitution. It should be 19. But it's also funny. The Maester says something kind of a little offbeat here. He says, those who wagered coin on you were most distraught. You know, like, well, it's a kind of an odd thing to say. Like, of all the observations to have, like, really, you're really paying that close attention to the betting, Maester? So I kind of think maybe he was one of the ones who bet on him. He might have been one of those who wagered good coin on him. So he may also not know that size doesn't matter for jousting, which, well, the Snail is going to say, my sigil drives up wagering. That's the point. It makes betting on, we get better odds that way. And the Maester may be an example of that. Dunk himself is an example of this mistake. Here's the quote.
Real quick, I wanted to give the Maester more credit than that.
Okay.
I think that maybe he just more has his finger on the pulse of things.
Entirely
He's probably
possible.
getting reports of the tournament, the wounded people coming in.
Yeah.
He's seen these tournaments plenty of times. He might have been smart enough to know not to make that bet, or that things can be manipulated or whatever.
Yeah, you're right.
But
definitely.
it would also add up if he had lost the bet.
Yeah. So the quote is?
Prince Baelor was well loved.
Not that one.
Oh, sorry.
Size.
Dunk wondered if the Master of Games was... Wait, no, that's not it either, sorry.
Size will always
We'll get there
impress the
eventually.
fools, though it means little and less in jousting. Will was able to get odds of 3-1 against me. Lord Shawnee gave 5-1. The fool.
Idiots.
And Dunk was that. Once again, this is Dunk just thinking, I expect to win because he's so much bigger. This guy kind of reminds me of Bronn, like an older, more established Bronn, like very skilled, very amoral, but patient, ambitious and patient at the same time. Like, he looks at everything in terms of profit potential. He doesn't really have a lot of loyalty, but he does have loyalty to things that work, right? He's going to be loyal to success.
And I appreciate that you say amoral, because I don't know if he's straight up immoral. Like, I mean, and he's doing dishonest things, but he's also doing, I don't know how to say it, safe things, correct things. Like, I don't think he ever said something that was straight up wrong or inaccurate or even unwise.
Nor is he like a psychopath or anything like that. I mean,
right. He's not trying to be mean or evil. He's selfish, I guess.
Yeah, he's definitely selfish. Very selfish. But
willing to be dishonest, but he's giving Dunk good advice. Like, look, man, you might not like the idea of hanging out with me, but you'll make money. You mess around these Targaryens, you're going to get burned. Like,
he's right about that.
He was giving good advice, and that's however selfish he is.
He's 100% right about that. He does end up getting burned, so that is how he dies, or drowned in sand because of fire. So it's more true than Uthor may even realize. He shares his name with Uthor of the Hightower, a legendary king of House Hightower, who married Maris the Maid before she was claimed by the so-called Grey Giant Argoth Stoneskin, who apparently won the first ever tournament in Westeros. So that's a fun little note here because, tournaments, right? We want a little tournament.
Say that name again. I wanted to see if I can keep this trivia in my brain.
Argoth Stoneskin, a.k.a. the Grey Giant. There's like two nicknames. He's got Stoneskin and the Grey Giant. Yeah. Now, we don't know. Sorry?
By the way, Sean, if you look at the Reach map that Michael Klarfeld did, he did all the children of Garth Greenhand, one of which is Maris the Maid, supposedly.
Supposedly, yeah. And of course, Garth Greenhand had a lot of children, a lot of famous children, and their ancestry to those children is the most important thing in terms of prestige, family prestige in the Reach. Its connection to those families, to those figures, is the source of a lot of that. So we don't know if Uthor himself actually took part in that first legendary tournament. But there clearly things have changed since then. If people were cheating back then, we don't know about it. But this Uthor is going his own way, clearly. One could see, he's really rich. You can see the money. He's just got stacks of money he's counting.
I don't think we made it clear there that Argoth, he won.
Oh, yeah, he did
win. But Uthor took Maris. Like, they still got married.
That's true. So that is kind of a connection. Uthor won without winning, which is kind of what this Uthor is doing. He wins without winning because he doesn't want to win. Winning, it goes against his goals because that throws off the betting. One win, or even a couple of wins makes him famous, and all of a sudden his ability to bet on himself gets a lot worse. So it is kind of strange, but really, you can see how the math would work out that way. Fame does have
another thought. Another thought, by the way, tying back to some of the other discussion about squires and sergeants, who maybe are kind of similar. That you could see how Uthor might eventually want more than one squire. Like, he's got enough stuff. He doesn't want a castle. He's going to need more help lugging his stuff around, keeping up with his finances and things like that. He might not, because it starts to bring too much attention to himself. And maybe he even does have 3 other squires that stay out of town when he's here for the tournament. He just brings this one person with him. But
okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
and you could see also how eventually, like in the military, like if an officer had a squire, servant, sergeant, right? Eventually, as the unit gets bigger, you need more of these sergeants to handle breakdown of the units underneath you. And you can see how maybe a knight who isn't as tied to a hedge knight, right? If they're successful in a long career, they might have more than one squire. But how old is the fiddler? He's not some veteran knight who slowly accumulated.
So another take here, Uthor's last name, Underleaf. That, Underleaf, it kind of sounds a little sneaky. Underleaf.
Underhanded.
Yeah, Nina suggests underhanded. I also thought of Underhill, which is the surname of the assumed name from Bilbo, or in Lord of the Rings, or is that Frodo? One of them goes by the name Underhill. I think Bilbo, as a name to conceal himself. So George being such a Lord of the Rings
people
fan.
In the chat telling us right now.
Yeah, there's
How do you not know?
Yeah, like get your Lord of the Rings right. Like sorry. No, our commenters are nicer than that, but sure they want to get that in there. Correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, yeah, I do appreciate corrections. So this is to scare Dunk a little more, the Snail has this line of pointing out all these enemies that Dunk might have. Now, to be fair, the Snail's not lying. He doesn't actually know who bribed him. He was bribed through an intermediary. So these are good guesses. Sure, he's trying to intimidate Dunk and win him over, but he's not like reaching with this take. Yeah, go ahead, Prince Baelor.
Yeah, and you can see that he's not necessarily trying to manipulate Dunk. He's trying to help him.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, it's
and
both,
he's
yeah.
clever enough, right? He has a certain wisdom. He's been around for a while. He could piece this together.
Yeah.
Prince Baelor was well loved. The Bright Prince had friends as well, friends who would not have forgotten the cause of his exile. Think of my offer, sir. The Snail may leave a trail of slime behind him, but a little slime will do a man no harm. Whilst if you dance with dragons, you must expect to burn.
There it is. Yep, there it is. Yeah, and of course, that second part, Prince Baelor's friends, like if someone was going to do something to him over Baelor, yeah, maybe that would have happened by now, but Baelor's friends are probably decent people. Like, Baelor was a good man. Arian's friends, those are the ones you really should worry about. Like, those are like cruel, greedy. Like, that man would attract some scumbags, some psychos on his side, so...
You know, he mentions that, and it makes me wonder, is that foreshadowing? Are we going to see someone that is more on Arian's side get mad?
Good call.
Or Arian himself.
Or Arian himself.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, point. Yeah, because Arian is coming back. Arian and Dunk and Egg will all fight in the Third Blackfire Rebellion together. So, yeah, and Arian's still Egg's older brother, and yeah, so... So we don't know when the exile ends, though. We don't know when it ends. We know it's definitely over by 219, but that's 7 years from now. It probably ends fairly soon from now because it's supposedly just a few years, and this is already like year 3 or near year 3 of that. So, yeah. So in one stroke, the Snail gives us a lot of information on what the tournament circuit is really like. The implication is that he's not the only guy like this. Maybe there's not lots of men like him. But he's probably not the only one. He's not probably not the first guy to figure out rigged gambling in tournaments. Like, almost certainly not, right? Like, he may have even been taught by someone that did this before him.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
But it's also something people can figure out. Like, it doesn't take a genius to figure this out. Like, plenty of gamblers out there, and that's also a neat thing too, because the theme of gambling is present in this story. It's not perhaps as prominent as some of the other themes, but Peak is taking a major gamble here, and so is Daemon. They're like gambling on these dreams. Daemon, of course, doesn't think it's a gamble. He sees it as like fate. He sees it as destiny. But
his dreams don't lie.
Yeah, but we understand why that is a gamble. He's gambling on his interpretation, in a sense. So you can call it a gamble even if he doesn't recognize it as that. But I think Peak really is gambling. In a way, he's rolling the dice on houses joining them. He's rolling the dice on their attitudes towards Bloodraven. More on that in a minute when we get to the reveal, because that's a major topic when we actually have Peak on screen again inside the Fiddler's tent. So, but it's an example of that theme that we cited at the beginning: recruitment. We've got people trying to recruit each other here. The Snail is like, hey man, well, let me bring you over on my side. We can make some money together. Why don't you join me? And there's just a lot of that going on. There's people trying to recruit people for the Blackfires. Daemon's trying to recruit everyone. He's just trying to show that charisma off. Meanwhile, there's some other people that we're not sure about. Like, Bloodraven has some spies. Some of them may have been recruited well in advance, but some of them he might have turned in the moment. He might have walked up to some people just sitting in there and like, hey man, what's happening? Can I bribe you? Like, the conversation wouldn't go exactly like that. But right? Like, it seems not unlikely that he may have made some connections day of or at the event. Don't you think?
Yeah, it makes sense that I don't know how to say this exactly, but he seems to have warmed up well to this group of Hedge Knights.
Yeah.
And especially if he already has some people in place, it might make it easier. I was thinking about like the gambling too, like if Uthor had one or two other knights who were also out there, making bets, propping up odds, spreading, rumors or whatever, how much more effective it would be.
That's true.
And same thing with Bloodraven. If he has 2 or 3 other people, already in place as guards or squires or whatever, like dropping hints, getting people ready to shift gears.
And the thing, an element to this that's really important is desperation. What the Snail is capitalizing on is he knows Dunk is a hedge knight, and he knows Dunk just lost everything because he lost it to him. He's like, all right, you have nothing. So, like, Dunk wouldn't have accepted this when he had his armor. He's not accepting it now, but he definitely wasn't going to accept it when he didn't need to. So he's trying to capitalize on Dunk's desperation here, which I think is, if you think about it, that's probably something that happens at tournaments. Like, you find someone that just lost everything and make them an offer when they're in that desperate state. You know, it's that's happened in every era of human existence. People find people who are desperate and get them to recruit them for. Sometimes you recruit them for the right reasons. You have noble goals in mind, but sometimes you're looking for desperate people because you want them to do underhanded stuff, and they would not normally agree to it. When they're desperate is the best time to get them to agree to it, because you don't have the luxury of being as moral as you want to when you're starving or what have you, right? And it's why I wonder about that with Kyle the Cat. He lost everything, is that when Maynard is working on him, or was this something ahead of time? So there's just lots of examples like this.
There's other things to consider here too. Some of this we'll even touch on, but the idea that Dunk right now has enough honor that no way he's going to do this thing for Uthor.
Yeah.
But what if someone depended on him? What if he had a kid he had to feed, right? Like, his squire happens to be a freaking prince, so he's not really worried about him. But if Dunk was more, not just for himself, but desperate for someone else that he cared about, maybe he would go along with Uthor.
That's a good point, yeah.
And I also wonder when Uthor says, like, 20 tournaments, that should be enough. Like, 20? Holy crap. But I wonder if that was an angle Uthor was making. It 20 might seem extreme, but he might get Dunk to do 3.
Yeah.
And think how much better off Dunk would be after 3 tournaments. He gets enough money to get a horse and armor back, and he learns a little bit more about jousting from Uthor. He legitimately might have been better off if he went along with it, even if it's a hit to his pride. We kind of know Dunk is not going to take that hit to his pride. It's not worth it, but it might have been worth it for the sake of, I'm thinking about like Ned doing it for Sansa or whatever.
Yes, absolutely, very good example. Here's another thing Dunk should have taken: this bet that Uthor offers. Here's a quote.
Sir Uthor arched an eyebrow.
Yeah.
Cosgrove is fond of silver. Cosgrove is as fond of silver as the next man, I promise you. I shall draw the old ox next. Then the boy. Would you care to wager on it? So
Cosgrove, of course, is the matchmaker. Yet another example of just like, yep, like this guy, of course I can bribe him. Or I have already bribed him, which is another example. But this is the guy, this is the master of the games. So, but Uthor is wrong. He does go the old ox, and then he goes up against Black Tom, which doesn't actually happen because then the egg accusation interrupts it. But when the announcement happens, we get a follow-up quote here.
Dunk glanced over at Sir Uthor in time to see the Snail's smile go sour. This is not the match he paid for. The master of games has crossed him up. But why?
And that's kind of funny because he wanted to face Glendon and he ends up facing Black Tom. It might have been better to face Black Tom. Glendon's really, really good.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
It is I thought that was a really interesting on a lot of levels. One thing it got me thinking about a lot. I think about this in general sometimes is how I would cast this.
Yeah.
When this gets made into some sort of film adaptation, but I think this would be a great performance. Whoever plays the Snail, it's got a lot of opportunity. I think this would be a great character.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
and I think that was a really good moment too. Like I agree. I will point out because I agree with Shay and a lot of people. This would be better off animated because you don't have to worry about finding an actor big enough to play Dunk, or Egg aging up and things like that. But that whole moment when he raises the eyebrow is like, oh really? Like,
yeah.
I think I'll get that matchup. But also, the way the matchup doesn't go the way he thinks, and that moment too, if I remember right, Dunk starts to, like in his quote, he's like, the Master of Games crossed him up, but why? Dunk starts to piece it together.
Yes,
and it's another technique of George, because as Dunk is scrolling through in his mind, it's like, well, there's this, there's that. And that only leaves, and if you in your mind piece it together as Glendon Ball, but suddenly that thought gets interrupted by the accusation. Yeah,
it's really well done, actually. Yeah, the way it all comes together.
George does that a few times, just as something is about to be revealed. Someone bursts in the room. Wait, it's gonna happen again here.
Yeah. A small note here, continuing on our theme of discussing squires and the way they're treated, and the way Dunk is just an outlier, how well he treats Egg. All that we mentioned that Dunk doesn't ever actually hit Egg, cloud him in the ear, except for to the one time he gives him, quote, half a cloud in the ear to actually help him avoid danger. It was to avoid a worse injury. That's the only time Dunk actually clouds him in the ear.
There was literally a spear on his chest.
Exactly.
Right?
Or to his neck, I think. Was whatever. Same difference. Yeah. But Uthor hits his squire in the side of the head, which is basically cloud in the ear, for a very small mistake during this scene, like in front of somebody else. So it just reminds you, like, it sort of provides that contrast. Like, this was an unimportant mistake that this guy made. You know, like, you didn't notice the dragon on this coin properly, and so he gets hit for that, you know. It's like, geez.
It seems like Uthor is making, I don't know how to cloud it, we'll say in modern day terms, is making thousands of dollars, and this squire made a mistake that might be hundreds of dollars.
Because it's not like the coin is worthless, they just have to melt it down. He still gets to keep the gold.
Just a little effort has to go into it, but on top of it, it's like a relatively easy mistake to make. Like Dunk, when he's even being questioned, takes a minute to figure it out. You know, when he already knows something is up, it still takes a minute for him to realize it. So.
Part of it is the name. It's Daron versus Daemon, and the name is so similar. It's only one letter different, and he's not that good at reading. So, like, you know, it adds up why he didn't notice right away. He's like, wait, beard, no beard. Like, what the heck? It's pretty cool. It's like a meta moment there with the coin, because on one hand, Uthor is showing his awareness of this. He notices something that they don't notice. On the other hand, he didn't notice all the Blackfire stuff happening. He doesn't realize this is a traitors tournament. That's like, he's so aware, but he's not aware of the politics. He's aware of, super keyed into the tournament aspect, but not like the big picture of who all these people are.
And that was a moment I referenced earlier when Dunk does piece together. He says, Daemon! You know, and he has already been told this is a traitors tournament. This is clue 1516 or something.
It also so it's a really cool moment because it does all this, but it also provides even more backstory. It's also like, wow, this rebellion was really serious. This guy had his own coins. Like, geez, because Robert didn't have coins during Robert's rebellion. He had them after, but you know, after he won, but not during. So
because he won so quick.
That's his part of it. He won so quick. But Daemon, Daemon lost fairly quick. I mean, it was maybe about a year. I don't know. Still, pretty quick. Pretender coinage is a real world thing as well. It's happened a few times. Nina gives us a couple examples. Henry V of France, who was the last male of the legitimate male line of Louis XV of France, minted his own coins in 1831, proclaiming himself Henricus V and using the traditional lilies of the French royal family, while the would-be Carlos VII of Spain of the Carlist line of Spanish royal pretenders issued his own coins as Carlos VII in 1875. So it's like part of the war is competing coins, you know, like, hey, better coins fighting than people. I don't know. I think that's less devastating, right? Leah Rubenfeld sends a super chat, says, could you talk about parallels to Sansa, the tourney, the castle made of snow, quote, and so on? Yes, we will. We actually have some of that prepared for the wrap up. So we won't get to it today, and we probably won't do it next week, but we absolutely will discuss that because the Mystery Night tournament compared to the Winged Night tournament is really good. We did sort of briefly touch on that today, but thank you for bringing that up, giving me an opportunity to give a preview for it. So yeah, we will get to that. Thanks for the note. Another funny moment here. Egg just hasn't quite shaken his maybe elitism. You know, it's the second time he has to be corrected on baseborn versus bastardborn. Dunk's like, does Bloodraven have an egg? He's like, why would he? He's baseborn. And he said he called him baseborn in the Sworn Sword also, and he's like, no, bastardborn, not baseborn. So
I wonder too, by the way, if that's another opportunity for George to remind the reader.
Yeah.
That he's not actually, because again,
that's a good point. Yeah.
Potential that someone these stories weren't released all together, and there's a lot of information in there. So not only is it a good technique for George to remind us exactly of Bloodraven's identity, but also to demonstrate it can be a little stubborn, you know, like in addition to maybe some ingrained elitism from his Targaryen family, but he also can be a little stubborn in general.
Yeah. From Karina, here's a fun fact since you mentioned Charles II in your last episode. Kit Harington and Rose Leslie, so John and Ygritte, are both descendants of Charles II.
Incest.
Yeah. Incest. Yeah, by that standard of incest, we're all incestuous because this is like how many generations back? Like 10, 12, 13, 14. But still, it is kind of funny. But yeah, it's like that thing with Genghis Khan where if you live in China, you're like odds are you have a very good chance of having some of his DNA because
it's something like 15%.
Yeah, it's really
crazy number.
Right,
yeah.
It's not Charles II.
Not only did he
high, but, yeah.
raped so many women, but also killed so many other people. Like he just reduced the population by such a also insanely significant amount.
Yeah, it's true. All those things factored together, plus just the passage of time. Khan was 900 years ago or so, and so you've got all those people, all his descendants having more and more descendants and more descendants. Yeah, it's just exponential. Yeah. That's why we don't call it incest, because it's like, yeah, well, if that's the standard of incest, then yeah, we're all incestuous. By the way, just a small note of a little example of Dunk dodging the knighthood question. Uthor asks him how he came to knighthood. He's like, yeah, Sir Arlen found me in Flea Bottom and promised he would teach me all these things. But he never actually says that Sir Arlen knighted him. He just says that he found him and trained him. Yeah. So the tourney, part 2. Let's get back to the tournament. Dunk re-encounter after he's back on his feet, after he's knocked down after the offer from the Snail. He encounters Glendon, who's in the opposite state of Kyle, because Kyle has lost everything. Meanwhile, Glendon is rolling in wealth now all of a sudden, just dominating, getting ransoms. But paradoxically, he's in more danger, even though Kyle has nothing, because Glendon's making enemies left and right. It's a classic textbook case of mo money, mo problems, right? That's the technical term for it. The theme of recruitment continues right on here with one of the very few earnest and honest attempts. I'll start. I thought if I showed them all how good I was, they'd have no choice but to admit I was my father's son. But they won't. Even now. They just won't.
Some never will, Dunk told him. It doesn't matter what you do. Others, though, they're not all the same. I've met some good ones. He thought a moment. When the tourney's done, Egg and I mean to go north. Take service at Winterfell and fight for the Starks against the Ironmen. You could come with us. The North was a world all its own, Sir Arlen always said. No one up there was like to know the tale of Penny Jenny and the Night of the Pussy Willows. No one will laugh at you up there. They will know you only by your blade and judge you by your worth.
So that's a great line. Like, we had to quote that one, right? It's such a good earnest, like I said, an earnest and honest attempt at recruitment. He's not asking him to serve. He's like, hey, join us. Let's be companions. Let's be equals. Not like, hey, come work for me. You know, that's one of the differences. Of course, Glendon's making so much cash here. He's like, yo, let's travel in style. I'll hire some dudes. Like, I got all this money now. I got all these horses. Yeah.
I point out real quick, too, that for the keen ear, we'll note that Sean probably didn't catch this, but that is a quote from Better Call Saul. It is probably our most quoted line from Better Call Saul, in fact.
Which line?
He just won't.
When Saul is working with the old folks home on their legal settlement. I said sediment. Legal settlement. Legal settlement, and one of the old ladies is like talking about her cats and how one of them
Oscar
clean.
And Felix. One of them.
I remember that now.
She's like, Oscar will clean himself, but Felix, he just won't.
It's very endearing because it's like, yeah, this woman wants to talk about her cats, and we get it. We get it. We like talking about our cats. So, yeah. So, also rereading the tournament gives you a different look at some of these scenarios. Like the first time through, when you're reading it, it's like, wow, Sir Galtrey the Green has a really close match against John the Fiddler. 10 lances they go by 10 times. Like, wow, really close. But no, not really. It looks like Sir Galtrey is making a good show of it. It actually might mean that Fiddler's so bad that Galtrey has to keep going bad. It's like, dude, knock me off my horse already.
Yeah.
Because like I think of that because Glendon's judgment is really harsh. Glendon, who knows his business, is like, I might not be able to lose to him if I was trying. Which is like, is he really that bad? He might be. I don't know. Like,
it could be that Galtry's that good also.
Yeah, he's just
And-
dancing
and-
around like pretending. Yeah.
Yeah, because one, you have to be pretty good to throw something.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah,
And
yeah.
especially throw it and not make it look obvious. And Galtry might have a certain amount of pride. He might not. He might have been really begrudging that he has to do this. He's like, I'll do it.
That's true.
But I'm not gonna. I'm still gonna make it. A challenge.
Think about like what Dunk said. Dunk's like, yeah, like if I keep losing to you, then everyone's gonna think I'm terrible. But like it less so if you lose close matches, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, so that's a good point here. Now this is funny because the setup of this whole thing is so clumsy and so ill-conceived that they have to take action against Uthor and Glendon, even though Glendon would have been a really good recruit for them. And Uthor is nothing like they don't have to bother.
He would have jumped right on board.
Yeah, they could have just been. Yeah, Glendon would have joined them, and Uthor would been like, "Yeah, just give me a little cash and I'm out." Like Uthor was already trying to lose, like just like Kyle the Cat. He's like he wasn't actually a threat to them at all, but because they have their wires crossed and don't understand what's going on, their intelligence is weak compared to Bloodravens.
Yes.
It's pathetic compared to Bloodravens. They played this all so badly. They could have made these guys allies, which it's almost too bad because Daemon, that's the attitude he wanted. He's like, let's recruit all these people. Let's make friends out of it. We need as many helpers as we can, which in that sense, he's right. But Peake is like, no, only the certain people. Like, no, man, you need help. So on one hand, I guess he's trying to avoid like conspirators, like too many cooks spoil the soup, like too many secret, letting the secret out. But still.
But we already saw like 2 random guards seem to know.
Yeah, like it's just too easy to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, it's what was I gonna say? You could see also in other ways that they seemed kind of at odds with the fiddler. Remember, I pointed out he seemed almost a prisoner.
Yeah.
When they found him up on a roof of the dunk, they're like, "Come with us now."
Yeah, yeah. He who controls the king controls the crown. Yeah, it's kind of like that thing. They're really ruling him as he like they're making him into a puppet. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's
Ooh, is there a parallel there we should have got from the first one with the puppets?
Oh, the puppets. Oh,
The dragon puppets, in fact. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, maybe. That's something to think about. Yeah, we'll keep that one in mind for the wrap up. So there's a possible oops here, or maybe it's just meant to be a nickname. It's not very explained. It's obviously not a big deal. But the character Lord Bulwer, the older guy who Bloodraven mocks for one of his eyes being dimming, even which we joked about before. At one point, he's called Lord Buford. Another point, he's called Lord Theomore. So I don't know what his real name is. Maybe he's just, he's both. He's Buford Theomore Bulwer. His armor is nicely black fire colored, red armor with black horns. That's the basically how it would look. Daemon Blackfire had red armor with black sigil, so that's kind of fitting. Maybe a little tongue-in-cheek joke by George here. There's a note that he killed 40 men on the red grass field. Now, just like so many other things, it's just said he killed 40 men on the red grass field. It didn't say what side he was on. Now, of course, by now we know what side he was on. And Maynard, in addition to denigrating him for his age, also denigrates him. He's like, yeah, that number goes up every year, like
Yeah.
But when he's knocked off his horse, he's dragged 40 yards, it says in the stirrup. So he probably wishes that was exaggerated. But now House Bulwer has a small but notable role in the main series. Alysanne Bulwer is one of Marjorie's women that's around her, but it's wrong to call her a woman because she's not even 10. So she's not one of the conspirators. She's not one of Marjorie's in on it type of girl. She's just, a noble girl who's actually probably the lady of House Bulwer right now. I think she inherited, which is why she's kept close at the court. Meanwhile, Blackjack Bulwer is on the wall, but he is dead. He's one of the ones who was sent in a group of 3 by John, and he's the one
in a scouting trip.
Yeah, he's
right?
one of the ones with the 3 heads that was found close by. So, oops, that didn't go well for him. Also, another house of note is House Kai. They're the one that Dunk hears people having sex in, apparently. That's a blue pavilion covered with sunflowers. They also traveled pretty far. That's why it's worth mentioning them, because they're near House Costain, which we know they're one of the more prominent houses here. Now, the Costains are son-in-law to Lord Butterwell, so they actually have a connection. But the Kais are, this is near Old Town. So it's pretty far, but it's still in the Reach. So, there's still a Reach house, which is this the heart of support for the Blackfires. But still, one of the farther houses, because this is, down on the coast. Also, the Hasties are there. White bend on purple. Might belong to them. Actually, this one's not certain because the Hasties are really small. We don't know of a Hasty before Sir Bonifer Hasty, so they may not even be... This may not even be the right house. But the Hasties are from the Stormlands, which would also be interesting because we don't know of any other Stormlands houses in attendance. In case you've forgotten who Bonifer Hasty is, he's the leader of the Holy 100, a.k.a. the Holy 86, who are currently in charge of Harrenhal. Jaime thought, or Cersei thought, was it Cersei's idea? Yeah, Cersei thought, put a really holy guy in charge of Harrenhal. That'll solve it, So, actually, before he goes to talk to the Snail, so we're jumping. We wanted to cover all of the Snail as much as possible there. But before he actually talks to him, that's when he runs into Maynard and Kyle. And that's when he sees them talking quietly. And that's why I wonder, what are they talking about? Like, Kyle's already lost. And maybe this is Maynard, like, they're discussing plans, like more things they can do if they're in on it together. Or Maynard is recruiting him. Or they're just talking. It doesn't have to be something conspiratorial. It doesn't have to be important. But if it is, these are, reasonable possibilities, I think.
Even if Cat isn't actively working for Bloodraven, the Cat isn't working for Bloodraven. Bloodraven can still get information from him.
Yeah, like what have people been talking about? What have you been hearing? Yeah, exactly. And this is perhaps the peak of Maynard just escalating his attempts to tell Dunk what's going on without directly telling him what's going on. He says, so here's a euphemism that gets used several times, which is the term a storm. The storm is coming. And this first example is Bloodraven says, or Plumraven says, the boy is fiddling up a storm and they should go before it breaks. And here's a quote. He says, you should get out of here. He's like, well, where should we go?
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure where you are.
Yeah, that one.
Size?
No, Sir Maynard.
You can always click on my cursor at the top.
On your cursor, okay.
At History of Westeros.
Sir Maynard shrugged. Anywhere. Winterfell, Summerhall, Shy by the Shadow. It makes no matter so long as it's not here. Take your horse and armor, slip out the postern gate. You won't be missed. The Snail's got his neck tilt to think about, and the rest have eyes only for the jousting.
He's like, get out of here. Go away. Which is funny, too, because he actually names a destination they talked about going to the stumps, because he already heard him talking about Winterfell. He's like, yeah, just go there. You were already talking about going. Just go. And it's funny because he goes Winterfell, Summerhall, like winter, summer. But it's also the place Egg's father happens to live. He's like, now, how would Sir Maynard know about that unless he's, yeah. Well, we've already covered that. And Asheye by the Shadows, just anywhere. Like, he names literally the farthest away city. And just get the heck out of here. It doesn't matter where you go. The where doesn't matter. Just not here. And that's when he leads him about as close as he does. He's like, okay, who do you think's going to win? He's like, the fiddler? It's like, yeah, now why? He's like, well, I just have a feeling. He's like, yeah, me too. Yeah. It's just so bold and blunt about it. Then, to repeat the metaphor, Alan Cockshaw uses the same basic line here, quote,
a few drops of rain, and all the bold lords go squealing for shelter. What will they do when the real storm breaks? I wonder.
And then Sir Glendon we hear that Gorman Peake tried to recruit him, and he says this.
He said there was a storm coming, like the likes of which Westeros has not seen for a generation. He would need swords and men to wield them.
Yeah, well, maybe a fire would be the more appropriate metaphor with a Y. A fire, a black fire. So it's a flaw in Peake for sure. He doesn't get a huge component of what Daemon Blackfire is so appealing. Daemon would not do things like this. Daemon would not do this like exclusionary, like, lose for me type stuff. Like, that's the attitude that Daemon got, like knightly, chivalrous. So this stuff is just working against that. The ideals that Daemon inspired in other people, Gorman's is going directly against that. And that's reflected perhaps no better than anywhere else than Sir Glendon's really good line when he's pulled from the dungeon here. He says,
my father died for him. I would have been his man, and gladly. I would have fought for him, killed for him, died for him. But I could not lose for him.
Right, and this is of course paralleled by Dunk refusing to lose for the Snail, so kind of staying building these themes gradually throughout the story to get to these more climactic moments that are similar. Not directly, but Egg agrees with Bloodraven, saying, "Yeah, we should leave." He even says Summerall. He's like, "Maybe we should borrow money." And Dunk has a kind of a good philosophical response here that I appreciate.
Hard things only go harder if you put them off.
That's what she said.
Heyo. True. Yeah, so even fireballs can turn to blue balls and such. Oh. Yeah, so he talks about having a proper master at arms, like Egg saying, he's like, or Dunk says, "You'll have a proper master at arms." And Egg's like, "I don't want a proper master at arms. I want you, sir." And it's funny to think about because there's actually some pretty bad master at arms. Fireball was a master at arms, and that didn't go very well. Like, he encouraged Daemon to rebel. Sir Alistair Thorne, who we mentioned earlier, a really bad master at arms. And then there was that guy that was a traitor to Aegon III. I forget his name, but he has a ton of parallels to Alistair Thorne, the one that was also he was sent to the wall, so he ended up in the same place. So yeah, there's some pretty bad. As a master at arms, being proper master at arms isn't always a good thing, the skill at arms part. Now on the other hand, there's people like Brienne's master at arms who was great. Like that guy, he was insightful and gave strategies that were appropriate for her skill set and disposition. So yeah, there are obviously good ones out there too. Excuse me. You noted a Bloodraven quote here.
Oh yes, I really appreciated when he said, because Dunk was trying to give the fiddler credit for not taking people's arms and horses and such when he won, and Bloodraven says, "Gallant gestures come easy when your purse is fat with gold." And I think that's a really good observation and something that Egg maybe should learn too. Yeah. It's a lot easier when you're a millionaire to donate $100,000 or $10,000, but if you only have $10,000, you're barely paying for yourself and your family. It's harder to be generous, and so when someone does do it, it's extra gallant.
Well, sticking with our occasional Simpsons quoting, as Homer said, with $10,000, we'd be millionaires. Yep. Can't help it. But no, you're right. This is a really good take because the inversion of that is something we've already talked about. Like, well, yeah, it's easy to be gallant and generous when you're rich. On the other hand, your options are limited and you might have to do dishonorable things when you're broke. Right? That's a big theme we've talked about already.
That would be the easy thing for Dunk to do. Just leave town and don't give the Snail the armor and horse.
Or to take the Snail's offer.
Yeah, but Dunk's not doing the easy thing. He's doing the right thing.
Yeah, no chance, no choice, sort of. A milder version of that, but still.
Yes.
But still taking on a lot of personal suffering to maintain his honor with bravery. And he really doesn't even consider the other. He doesn't even, he's like, I mean, he maybe briefly considers leaving, but he doesn't consider the Snail's offer even for a second. Does not entertain it.
Yeah.
So... Eavesdropping moment number 2. Dunk wasn't done dropping eaves. 2 older men. Like you said, even some of the guards are figuring it out. And here's a perfect example of that. George again doing it kind of sneaky. Dunk figures out what this quote means about 5-10 minutes later after hearing this. But here it is.
A pair of grizzled men-at-arms were drinking barley beer outside a striped pavilion a few feet away. "Well, bugger that. Once was enough for me," one muttered. The grass was green when the sun...
The grass was green when the sun come up.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure if that was 2 different people speaking or not, but it could be. I think it probably is, but I'm not sure.
I got the idea that one of them nudged the other when he saw Doug's like, hush, hush, hush.
Yeah, that did happen, yeah.
Applied to what they were saying, yeah.
But the grass was green when the sun came up. That's a reference to the red grass field. It was green, then it was red when the sun was going down, yeah. And then once was enough, like one rebellion was... yeah, exactly.
I was going to ask that. Yeah, I didn't fully understand what that quote meant, but I get it now. The grass is green when the sun come up, but red when it went down.
Yeah.
Once was enough for me. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, it was a brutal battle. No one wants to repeat that, especially being on the losing side. So let's see. Now we're at the reveal. Dunk asked to speak with John the Fiddler as he's searching for Egg, and of course, Daemon's like, "I'll send my men to help." He's like, "Your men, huh?" It's like just like becoming more and more clear. So fittingly, too, the moment where Daemon II's identity is spoken aloud comes with a mention of his eyes being similar to eggs, which, of course, casts our mind back to the reveal of Egg's reveal and his eyes back in the first short story. Gorman and Kim...
It was...
Go ahead.
It was, by the way, a very similar. I was going to point this out. Another example of George, like right before there's an interruption. Remember Egg in the first book, the Fossaway, Stefan Fossaway was like running down all the Targaryens, and he's about to get to Egg when Egg bursts in the door. Dunk, they're attacking Tansel. We gotta go. You know, it's right at that moment.
That's really
and
good.
then here, it's just about he's about to he's all but said it.
Yeah.
But not actually said it. And Gorman Peake comes in, or has come in, and says, his name will be revealed soon enough.
Yeah, it's so funny.
Cuts him off just before,
It's so funny because Gorman is being like Dunk here. He's like, he still thinks that there's some mystery here, that they're still being subtle, that people don't know. He's like, don't tell them who you are. Like, bro, everyone knows. It's just like Dunk thinks he's incognito. Nope. He's as incognito as Daemon. Like, y'all just don't get it. You stand out. Like, this guy's 7 feet tall. This guy's got purple eyes and wealth, and all the other Blackfires are here. Yeah, just too easy.
And a hedge knight on the dais making toast with a whole entourage and wealthy armor. He's not the facade is gone.
And it becomes another recruiting moment, right? It's like, you should, he's mad. Gorman is like, don't talk about that. And Damon's like, dude, he's going to be on our side. Don't worry about it. He's joining us. And that's part of why Daemon's so generous. He's like, I'll help you find Egg. Then he offers him a horse. And he's like, and Dunk still says no, even though he really needs a horse right now. Yeah. And this is kind of similar to Rohan, where she offers a horse, even though, they both offer him a ride. And he doesn't accept their ride. Yeah.
This isn't just a recruiting moment, it's a seduction moment.
Yes, you're right. It's both. So Gorman's like, all right, I may as well explain. He has sort of the villain moment where they explain everything that we kind of already know, but the main character needs it summarized, or and of course when you're reading this for the first time, it's good to have this all summarized. So Shea will read the first part.
Lord Butterwell wanted a new young wife to warm his bed, and Lord Frey had a somewhat soiled daughter. Their nuptials provided a plausible pretext for some like-minded lords to gather. Most of those invited here fought for the Black Dragon once. The rest have reason to resent Bloodraven's rule or nurse grievances and ambitions of their own. Many of us had sons and daughters taken to King's Landing to vouchsafe our future loyalty, but most of the hostages perished in the Great Spring sickness. Our hands are no longer tied. Our time is come. Ares is weak, a bookish man, and no warrior. The commons hardly know him, and what they know, they do not like. His lords love him even less. His father was weak as well, that is true, but when his throne was threatened, he had sons to take the field for him, Baelor and Maekar, the hammer and the anvil. But Baelor Breakspear is no more, and Prince Maekar sulks at Summerhall, at odds with king in hand.
I thought, Dunk, and now some fool hedge knight has delivered his favorite son into the hands of his enemies. How better to ensure that the prince never stirs from Summerhall?
So there's a lot of important points in there. Of course, that's the longest quote we've read, probably the entire short story. But one point we didn't really discuss much, it kind of speaks for itself. The point about hostages dying in the Great Spring Sickness, that was holding them back from a second rebellion prior to this. But now there's just so many of those hostages died of the Great Spring Sickness, or just a few of them probably just died anyway, because it's been 16, 17 years. Dunk has one of his biggest thick as a castle wall moments, deciding, oh man, I brought Egg into the... Now that really hurts his, his honor, the way because he thinks like his job is to protect Egg, right? That's his number one duty, other than, being a good knight and a good tutor to him as well. He brings him into one of the most dangerous places he could have possibly taken him, so he kind of feels responsible for that. On the other hand, Gorman Peake's reads here are about as bad in some places as his take that this is all secret. Is like Maekar would not sit there sulking if a war broke out. Maybe if his son was hostage, but at this point, Gorman Peak has no clue who Egg is, so that's not part of his calculus at all. He's just like, nah, Maekar's going to chill. He won't join the war because he's mad at Bloodraven. That is a terrible judgment of Maekar. I'm pretty sure Maekar would absolutely jump into this war. Like, no question. That would bring him back, I think. I'm not, maybe
I totally agree.
Okay, good. Maekar, of course, as partly proof of this, when Maekar does become king and the Peaks have their own rebellion, which they probably had the attitude of this one, like, we'll get started in a rebellion and people will join us, because that rebellion went nowhere also. But Maekar still led in person the siege of their castle and died doing that. So, yeah, he's not a stand back kind of guy. He's a hands-on sort of commander.
Like, my take on why he's sulking is that he feels like he's been edged out.
Yeah.
He just doesn't have a role. Bloodraven, whatever, they're going to do what they're due. What can I do? He'd rather not get mixed up in it, and probably doesn't care as much about court politics anyway.
Right.
But when it's time for war, when it's his family, he's going to be all in.
Yeah.
That's almost what he's waiting for.
I agree. It gives you a chance to show himself up. Like, yeah, right now at court, they're talking prophecies, they're bookish and all that. Yeah, you can see why he wouldn't be into that, in addition to the stuff about his pride that you mentioned, which I think is totally on point. But yeah, there's this too. Yeah, you're right. It's his chance. Like, he can show what he's capable of, the thing that he's already famous for. It's like, why would he sit out?
And in fact, maybe more Stannis parallels when you think about it. What was going on at court? Like, Renly and Robert are like getting drunk and flirting with girls. Like, Stannis didn't want to have anything to do with that.
Yeah.
He did not like what court had become, right? But when it was time for war, we're like, wait, there's a Joffrey's not the real king. There's a usurper. There's a okay, call the arms. Let's go to battle. He didn't sit back and sulk. Then, when it was time to take action, he took action.
Yeah. So Peake's explanation of the tournament, it also sort of emphasizes how foolish some of it was, as he's talking about, well, he thinks he's being all smart here, this pretext for lords to gather at a tournament, which is why we mentioned the tournament of Harrenhal as a similar example here, especially since that was a prelude to a possible rebellion, a rebellion that never actually got off the ground at the time, just like this one. But they go to a tournament to chat, but the problem is the big flaw in that plan is you've gathered all these heads of state without their armies. Like, they're all very vulnerable. Like, as we just discussed, when Maekar went to shut the Peaks down, when is that, 20 years from now? He went in person. It was really difficult to stop to besiege. He had to besiege their castle. Even a small lord isolated with no help, those castles are really hard to get inside, right? Like, you can hold out for a while in a siege if you have a decent castle, and they did. So they exposed themselves. They left the protection of all their castles without their armies with them, and that is absolutely going to burn them big time here in a few pages from here. And so the counter argument comes from Dunk right here, talking about Bloodraven.
There is Bloodraven, he said. He is not weak.
No, Lord Peak allowed. But no man loves a sorcerer, and kinslayers are accursed in the sight of gods and men. At the first sign of weakness or defeat, Bloodraven's men will melt away like summer snows. And if the dream the prince has dreamed comes true, and a living dragon comes forth here at White Walls...
Dunk finished for him. The throne is yours.
His, said Lord Gorman Peak. I am but a humble servant. He rose. Do not attempt to leave the castle, sire. If you do, I will take it as proof of treachery, and you will answer with your life. We have gone too far to turn back now.
Just wrong, and wrong again, Peak. So, but funny too. Before the wrongness, it's funny that he was like just told to leave. Like, Plumraven's like, get out, leave, go now, and now Peak's like, if you leave, I will kill you. It's like, dang it. But yeah, so first of all, I am but a humble servant. Yeah, right. You are not humble, even a little. And Butterwell and Frey are both going to disagree that it's too far to turn back now. They're going to absolutely turn back. Oh, and everybody else too, right? Piss on that, fiddle boy, is going to be a line that tells the story. He's like, we'll ride hellbent for King's Landing. And they're like, nah, no, we won't.
By the way, do you think think George chose the name Gorman specifically to evoke the idea of Gormless, of the idea of him not being smart enough for all this?
Maybe, but someone else made the point of like the Gormenghast and the peak, Gormenghast and the peak thing from. Oh, I'm spacing on what trilogy that's from. It's from.
Okay.
Maybe from, was it Vance?
Okay, cool. I just must have missed that when we brought it up earlier.
Yeah. I'm probably repeating the anecdote wrong, but yeah, we did have someone else made that connection about probably a reference to other authors there. Okay, so let's start to wrap up for the day. We've got a few more questions and a couple of fun takes here. Next time we'll start off with the accusation.
Let me take this opportunity, Aziz. What is your shirt? Is that a Blues Brothers?
It is, yeah.
On the wall?
It is.
It's Sam and John, I see.
Sam and John with, it says...
the Night's Watch Brothers.
Yeah, Night's Watch Brothers, yeah. They're already pretty well dressed for it. They got the tattoos on their fists,
Yeah, we got...
They're all dressed in black.
Yeah, you got a compliment in the chat earlier on your shirt, Aziz.
Oh, cool.
And people asked about your shirt, Sean, and I told them what it was. You can say
Yes.
yourself.
Smugglers you can trust. It's Han Solo, Davos, and Mal from Firefly.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I love that shirt of yours, Sean. That's an excellent one. Speaking of shirts, go to historyofwesteros.com, historyofwesteros.threadless.com for a variety of shirt designs and other non-shirt things like stickers.
You can also find the link at historyofwesteros.com. So
Yeah,
can't go
any
too
way
wrong.
works. There's multiple ways to get there. You should not feel like you have no way to find it.
You can get a shirt that says "Good said."
You can, or Well Point, or just History of Westeros.
I have not put a Well Point shirt in, but you've been saying it
Oh,
so much,
whoops.
I clearly should.
I guess so.
I also feel like I need to make Sean's catchphrase, which is, does that make sense?
That's the beauty of it. We're just getting started. We kind of put it off for a while. There's podcasts that have only been around for a year that already have shirts, and we, took us about 9 years. But hey, better late than... What's the phrase? No, better late than... I know it's never, but better late than ever.
Better late than 10 years.
Just better late. Stop there.
That's my catchphrase, better late.
That is true. That really is Sean's catchphrase, let me tell you.
So Bloodraven makes another eyes joke here. When he says, who do you think is going to win the tournament? He's like, I don't know. He's like, venture a guess, sir. You have 2 eyes. I was like, you have 2 eyes. And then when Sean, you read this one, the quote about Kyle facing Lord Caswell.
Dunk did not know how well Sir Kyle wielded a lance, but from the way Lord Caswell sat his horse, it looked as though a loud cough might unseat him. All the cat need do is ride past him very fast.
That's also, I can't help it today with the Simpsons references. That's like when the doctor said that Mr. Burns had every disease known to mankind, and he's like, so you're saying I'm indestructible? He's like, no, actually, sir, a small breeze, indestructible. Yes, a small breeze could knock Lord Caswell off his horse. And here's George with a little wordplay in the next quote.
Sir Kyle said, Lord Caswell did not know me. When I told him how I carved his first sword, he stared at me as if I had lost my wits. He said there was no place at Bitterbridge for knights as feeble as I had shown myself to be. The cat gave a bitter laugh.
No place at Bitterbridge for the cat who gave a bitter laugh. I'm sure George chose bitter on purpose there. Like, there's so many types of laugh. He could have put there cynical or sardonic or rueful, but he's like, no, I'm going to go. It's not rueful bridge. It's Bitterbridge.
Maybe that was just lazy alliteration. He just used the same word twice.
Bitterbridge, bitter laugh, yeah.
I make good rhymes with my rhymes.
Here's another one exchange between Plum, Raven, and Dunk. He says, what do you know of egg?
I know the eggs do well to stay out of frying pans, said Plum. White Wells is not a healthy place for the boy.
Which, again, fits with the heat of the day, too. So,
oh, good call, yeah.
And this...
Yeah, Bloodraven got the other egg out of the heat.
Oh, you're right. He stole it right out of there. You're totally right. He snatched that right out. That's hilarious. And then I love this moment when the snail is like brainstorming like terrible sigils for Dunk to look fearsome. I love this line.
yeah.
Here it is. I call it the foul brainstorm.
The hangman is grim enough, I grant you, but, well, he's hanging, isn't he? Dead and defeated. Something fiercer is required. A bear's head, mayhaps, a skull, or 3 skulls, better still. A babe impaled on a spear. And you should let your hair grow long and cultivate a beard. The wilder and more unkempt, the better.
It's so funny. It's like, oh, I know, a babe impaled on a spear. Yeah, that's great. It's awesome, man. Like, what could be better? Jeez.
Makes me think of the Blackmont sigil there.
Yeah, the
vulture holding
the
a
vulture
baby.
with the baby. Oh wow, yeah, I could have worn that short
is
shirt
definitely
today.
Intimidating.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's and you root against that. You you want the other guy to win, but you might be like, oh, but that guy's scary, so he's probably dangerous. Is people believing in sigils? Like you lean into that. Like if it works, it shouldn't work, but it does. Like if they're gonna think the snail guy sucks, then the babe impaled upon the spear guy is fearsome. That's how it works, even if it's all just an act. So. A sucker is born every minute, they say, but maybe 2 suckers are born every minute in Westeros. Yep. Well, that, I think, does it for the day, unless we have a few more questions or any final thoughts from you, Sean. I'm scrolling down to see. Oh, yeah, we do have a couple of takes here. Looks like a couple of final questions and one good final thought from Nina. And, Sean, you were going to present us with a kitten, weren't you?
Oh, yeah, I can do that.
Why don't you grab a kitten while I read these last few notes here, and then if you have any final thoughts, we'll take those right at the end. On our Discord, Josh, a.k.a. Chatting Myth, mentioned, I was thinking about this when you were talking about the Jacobite risings. George is really good friends with Diana Gabaldon, who is the author of the Outlander series, whose first 2 books focus on Bonnie Prince Charles and the rising of 1745. Right on. That's cool. Little connection there. George is... I love reading about authors putting Easter eggs from other authors in their books. Like we noticed the historical parallels, things like that is kind of like the Jack Vance, the Gormenghast thing. I'm not even sure I have the right author for that one, but we certainly cited Jack Vance and Gormenghast at times if they're not the same reference, and plenty of other references. I personally know the historical stuff better, which is why it's really awesome when y'all illuminate us on these connections that we aren't always able to catch. So community effort as always. Nina wrote up a little batch of examples of Mystery Nights.
Here it is, just real quick. It is the Gormenghast series is a series by Mervyn Peake.
Mervyn Peake, that's what it was. Okay, yeah, I didn't feel right calling that Vance. Yeah.
That whole time you kept saying it, I thought you were talking about Gorman Gas.
Oh,
I was
like 2 names.
Yeah, well, yeah, about a gas. It was like a
I know
gas
Gormenghast is a weird word, right?
Yeah, Gormenghast.
But 1 word, yeah. So here's a brief rundown of Mystery Nights and A Song of Ice and Fire. There are certainly more that haven't been written about because it's a somewhat, it's a recurring thing. Certainly, like Dunk talks about how people like Mystery Nights. So clearly that means it has to be a somewhat normal thing. But here's a couple examples that we know of.
First.
Oh, we got the kitten?
Yeah.
Very nice.
Sean's muted still, though.
Mystery kitten.
Let's see how long it lasts.
Yeah, Jet right here is on screen, and she was crying at you, Sean, while you were recording.
Yeah, I could hear it through the door.
We could hear it. That's how I know, obviously. It was just all of a sudden a little kitty
It was
meow.
cute, yeah.
There's also a cable that we have running underneath the door, and that was getting tugged at.
Cats.
They want so bad to be with the people, wherever the activity or action is, the kitties want to be there. So
I know sometimes people think cats aren't that social. They just kind of hang out, but they like to be around their people.
It's so obvious, especially having 3 of them in the house. Every time you go into another room, even they were like dead asleep, and suddenly they're all 3 at your feet when I'm trying to do the dishes or go to the bathroom or anything.
Yeah.
They all definitely want to just be with me.
Yeah.
Everyone's
Or Rita or whoever's around.
Everyone's marveling at how big she's grown.
Yeah.
She is getting bigger and bigger.
Nice.
I think she's close to 6 pounds at this point. I think the first time you saw her on screen, she might have been 4. Not sure exactly, but
Well, we have to. It'll be a fun journey to see how big they all get. A lot of Westorians will see the stages of cat growth, and will settle on a eventual weight when they're adults.
But
Yeah, I used to be able to hold core in one hand. I can't quite do it anymore. Yeah.
Back to what you were talking about, though, Aziz, which was a rundown of Mystery Nights.
Yeah, rundown of Mystery Knights and Song of
My
Ice and Fire.
favorite is first.
Right on.
Jonquil Dark. She's the one who competed at the War for the White Cloaks as the Serpent in Scarlet. She wasn't a formal knight, and she's the one who eventually, obviously, became one of Queen Alysanne's bodyguards.
So basically a king's guard, but more of a queen's guard.
Yes.
You know, the skill without quite the honorific title, but, you know, very much earned. Then we have Balon Targaryen, who competed at the tourney at Old Oak as the Silver Fool. He was not actually a knight yet, but he was knighted for doing that. He kind of cool way to earn your spurs, I suppose. Aemon the Dragon Knight, one of the most famous knights ever, competed as the Knight of Tears. That's just so he could name his own sister the Queen of Love and Beauty, sort of helping to dispel the notion that she was his lover, although that may have worked against him here. This is not something you... Naming your own sister Queen of Love and Beauty probably makes the opposite case. So, I don't know, this may not have been the wisest move on his part in terms of dispelling those rumors. But it was impressive nonetheless, and a great example of mystery knightdom. Barristan Selmy, mystery knight twice, at least. Two that we know of, probably just the two. He probably would have thought of the others. But first time at the age of 10, which is the famous time where he got his nickname Bold for showing up there. He couldn't even hold his lance up. Bold boy. And of course, it was Duncan the Small who gave him that title. And
what was the other time?
The second one is he's age 16 when he is at the so-called winter tournament at King's Landing, where he quote, performed great feats of prowess, defeating Prince Duncan the Small and Sir Duncan the Tall, who was Lord Commander of the Kingsguard at that point. And he was also not a knight yet, but he was knighted kind of like Balon. He got his knighthood at this tournament, and it was by Egg, who was king at the time. So King Aegon V by then. So that's pretty cool, huh? Barristan's wrapped up in all this. Not only that, but Barristan's the one who killed Maelys Blackfire, as we just talked about earlier, the one who kills Stannis, Renly, and Robert's granddad. Which is also cool because that was Barristan's liege lord that he was avenging, because he's a Stormlander, and Ormond Baratheon's the Lord of the Stormlands. So that was very cool for a lot of reasons there. We have Simon Toyne of the famous / infamous Toyne family. Simon himself was the leader of the Kingswood Brotherhood, or one of the leaders of it, and he competed in the Storm's End tournament in that era before being beaten and unmasked by Rhaegar. But I guess because of honor rules and because he was allowed to compete, they let him go because he wasn't arrested there. I guess I don't know. Chivalry causes weird things to happen sometimes. The so-called Bastard of Uplands, who competed at a tournament in Old Town as the Mystery Knight Blackshield. And Barristan Selmy beat him and exposed him. Then, of course, the most famous example of all is Lyanna as the Knight of the Laughing Tree.
Warning, Cora on the screen now. Different cast.
Second kitty showing up.
I'm surrounded. The third ones might step on a computer at any minute. So. They're all here.
Final note, Mystery Knights are a real historical phenomenon, too. Just like traitor or pretender coinage, so are Mystery Knights real. Nina writes us an example. The young King Henry VIII, once disguised himself along with a companion, so they were double Mystery Knights. This was just a small tournament that he entered, and like a gentleman's tournament. He was going really well, and he was getting praised, apparently. The disguised Henry was getting, accolades until his likewise disguised companion got hurt. I mean, it is a joust. These things happen. And someone yelled out, "God save the king!" And people thought he was the one hurt, because I guess people were suspicious that he was there. So he's like, "No, I'm not the one. It's me. I'm the friend." And so he had to reveal himself. So it's like, "No, I'm not the one hurt. It's just my friend here." And they're like, "Oh, okay, cool. No problem." And then Edward III also twice disguised himself and competed in tournaments as a simple knight named Sir Lionel. And Lionel is meant to be a tribute to the Lions of England, the Sigil and Arthurian stuff as well. So that's pretty cool. There's probably lots more examples of Mystery Knights in the real world, but those are some really good examples to set it all up. But I encourage you all to send us other examples. If you know of them, we might read them aloud, because I do love hearing real world parallels. Also, other examples of pretender coins or anything else you think is relevant to this story in any fashion, send it to us and we will shout it out if we find it to be on point enough. So that should about do it for today. Any final thoughts, Sean, or you want to wave the cats at the screen?
Yeah, I've got Cora in my arms here.
She's just so well behaved. I was commenting. He just has one arm, and she's just in the crook of his arm.
That's so nice.
This is her facade. You should see when she gets riled up.
Nice. Okay, thanks to everybody. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Ashaya. Thanks, Nina. Thanks to our Facebook mods. Thanks to everyone who came live and
Including
participated
our
in
live
chat.
audience.
That's right.
Yeah, which, by the way,
go ahead.
I pointed this out, I don't know, a few episodes ago, that I try to read all the comments, both the comments on the YouTube video, but also the live chat. So I don't know if you have questions for me, or if you want me to follow you on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, let me know. Hit me up.
Right on. Yeah, at Dancing Sean, definitely do that. Also, like I said, any of our discussion places, Flick, Facebook, Slack, Discord, Twitter, email. Yeah, all those are great. Thanks as well to Michael Klarfeld for his map work and video intro. Thanks to Kevin McLeod for the Valar Rereadis music. Thanks to Joey Townsend and Jesse Koval for our regular intro-outro music. Thanks to the Bengineer for sound quality assistance. Our friends over at Here Be Dragons are doing I Know That Nerd with Lady Gwyn of the Radio Westeros Dancers. Thanks.
What are they covering?
Just here, I Know That Nerd is a recurring, like, AMA type thing, like they get to know.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking There Be Dragons, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, Here Be Dragons, I Know That Nerd combo. Yeah, they're that combo.
Yeah.
That's basically what he started doing, was just I Know That Nerd, then they branched into the other topics. This is kind of a
I guess he
throwback, sort
he
of.
hasn't known you then, Sean, has he?
Yeah, maybe.
No, I have not been known as a nerd yet. There, at least.
Seems like one day that'll happen. Also, shout out to our live studio audience for the second week in a row. Last week we had Rita. This week we have my mother. How cool is that? Hi, Mom. Say hi, Mom, everybody. Hi. Hey, Aziz's mom.
Hey, Aziz's mom.
Yeah, all right. So next week we should be able to wrap this up for the Mystery Night. And then the week after we'll have a full Dunkin' Egg wrap. And after that, well, stay tuned. We'll be putting out a schedule on our various social media platforms, so you'll know what's coming up afterwards. But we're still working on that as we speak as of today, so keep an eye out for that later. And until next time, everyone, Valar Rereadis.